Number 10. Ant-Man. After Brian Michael Bendis took over the Avengers, he decided to shake things up a bit in order to create a new main roster for the team with the Avengers Disassembled story. In this story, we saw the Avengers mansion and many teammates killed when the corpse of Jack of Hearts shows up at the mansion randomly, urging the Avengers that he brings a message of warning. Scott Lang moves towards Jack just as he explodes, destroying the mansion and killing Lang. We later learned that this was all Scarlet Witch's doing, who at the time was beginning to lose her grip on reality due to her famous psychotic break, which of course would later lead to the events of House of M and later on M-Day. Number 9. The Wasp. Near the end of Secret Invasion, Janet Van Dyne was taken out, and of course no one was expecting that as it was near the end of the event, and all in all it was kinda random. It's revealed in issue 8 of Secret Invasion that Janet herself was turned into a biological weapon by the Skrulls, who were able to get her a new growth hormone posed as a gift from Hank Pym. But of course it wasn't Hank, it was a Skrull disguised as Hank. Janet obviously took this new growth hormone, which she was told would allow her to turn from giant size to microscopic like that. What it truly did was turn her into a giant biological weapon, attacking everyone around her, Skrull and human alike, until she finally began to shrink down and she died. Number 8. Hellcat. A pretty crazy turn of events led to Patsy Walker's death in the 90s, when comics was pretty much nothing but a crazy turn of events. After seeing the darkness of her husband Damon Hellstrom's soul, or Hellstorm as he was known then, Patsy was driven insane. She became a shadow of her former self, rail thin and babbling non-stop about Damon at all hours. Meanwhile, in Hellstorm Prince of Lies issue 14, Damon seems to be off having a fine old time while this is going on. In the end, Patsy's desperation to be at peace brought a being known as Death Urge to her. This being was there to help Patsy pass, which apparently was what she wanted. He kills her pretty gruesomely by driving a spike through the back of her head. Yikes. And she has to go fight people in hell for a bit. That's how it goes. Number 7. War Machine. During the events of Civil War II, we all knew we were going to need a catalyst for the war, but I don't think anyone would have expected that it would be War Machine's death that would have got us there. During a conflict with Thanos that Ulysses the Inhuman predicted, Rhodey died. A single and brutally direct punch from Thanos was all it took. Even with his armor, War Machine didn't stand a chance. At this time, he was dating Captain Marvel, and Carol, believing his death could have been avoided, started to try and get people to listen to Ulysses' visions and react before their events could come about. Whereas Tony Stark cautioned against trusting the visions and suggested they simply react to events as they happened. This is what basically started the war, and while many were surprised and sad at Rhodey's death, fortunately he would later come back to life following Tony Stark's own resurrection from a comatose state following the conflict. Number 6. She-Hulk. Recently in Empire number 4, She-Hulk was revealed to have actually died back in Empire 1. In Empire issue number 1, Shulky is given a hammer by the alien plant race of the Kotati. The hammer is said in combination with Kotati meditation techniques to help She-Hulk channel her rage, restoring her brilliant mind to her. How nice, you might think. But we later learn that the Kotati are actually the bad guys in this situation, and it's later revealed during her off-panel adventure where she's supposedly given this hammer and taught techniques that she was actually killed by the Kotati so they could use her body as a weapon and as their own vessel. She transforms into a plant monster, and in a flashback we witness Jennifer Walters' fate as it's quickly summed up that yes, she died. What was so shocking about this death was that it was kinda just skipped right over. We learn of the death and then it's kinda on to the next thing. Like, it's no big deal. Making you wonder if you really read what you just think you read. But yeah, you definitely did. Number 5. A Death in the Family. You might be thinking, but wait a minute, shouldn't we have seen this one coming at least? During the unfolding of a story involving Jason Todd's Robin leaving Batman's side and searching to find his birth mother, writers at DC allowed the fans to decide Todd's fate. Jason Todd had proved to be more unpopular in his role as Robin in comparison to the former Robin, Dick Grayson, and writers figured they'd let the fans decide whether Jason Todd remained as a character or was permanently wiped out. Killed. In the end, the votes were close, but the majority said that Jason Todd should perish. So, he did. What shocked many fans is that DC actually followed through, and this death was also pretty gruesome. Apparently, many fans who actually had voted thought it was a ruse, and so had not put too much consideration into their vote, assuming DC would never actually follow through with it. Letting the fate of Todd be decided by a fan poll even shocked Frank Miller, who commented that he thought it was the most cynical thing DC had ever done. Number 4. Heroes in Crisis. One of the more more shocking superhero deaths to happen recently in DC was a massacre at the Superhero Mental Rehabilitation Center, The Sanctuary. This happened in the limited comic book series Heroes in Crisis. Many lost their lives in the massacre, including Roy Harper and reformed Poison Ivy. What was more shocking was when we learned that another superhero was responsible for the deaths, although the massacre for them was not intentional. Originally, the murderer was actually believed to be either Booster Gold or Harley Quinn, but it was later revealed that Wally West, who was also one of the suspected dead at the time, was the one responsible, and that his trauma had caused him to lose control of the Speed Force, which caused the energy blast that killed everyone. Number 3. Bucky Barnes. I don't think anyone would have expected Captain America's sidekick Bucky to have been killed, especially because originally in the continuity he wasn't. Both he and Cap had continued to fight on after the war, but it was later retconned that this wasn't actually the true heroic duo, and that they had actually gone missing during the end of World War II. Cap was then recovered, but we would later learn via flashbacks to World War II events of Bucky's death and how he had gone MIA while he was working with Cap. Bucky's suspected death was a surprising revelation and became known as one of the irreversible deaths in comics. That is until the early 2000s when Ed Brubaker, in another shocking twist, brought Bucky back, revealing he'd been alive this whole time and giving us the brilliant Winter Soldier. While the death of kid sidekick Bucky Barnes was shocking, discovering he was actually alive was even more so. Number 2. Death of Wolverine. While we knew that Wolverine's healing factor was beginning to fade due to a viral infection that was plaguing Logan, he was also one of Marvel's most popular characters. Wolverine was such a big character at this point in 2014 after years of being one of the most iconic X-Men and tons of animated and live action films only adding to his popularity. No one expected that Marvel would actually want to wish him ill. And yet, in September of 2014, the death of Wolverine began, which saw Wolverine hunted down by his enemies thanks to a bounty that had been placed on his head by Viper. In the end, it's actually revealed that the founder of Weapon X, Dr. Abraham Cornelius, is behind the plot to capture Wolverine. During the fight with Cornelius, Wolverine finds himself covered in liquid adamantium. This hardens around him, and due to his healing factor not working at the time, he suffocates and dies. Number 1. Death of Superman. The Death of Superman was a crossover story that was meant to shock readers and show them that the invincible Superman they'd come to know over the years wasn't quite as invincible as they maybe thought. Death of Superman was an event that began near the end of 1992 and took place over the course of what was almost a full year in real time, ending in October 1993. The idea for the story involving Superman's death actually came out of a passing joke. While brainstorming ideas for replacement stories for the story of Lois and Clark getting married, which DC decided to postpone, Jerry Ordway suggested they should just kill him. Sales for the Superman series had actually recently begun to drop off, and this joke quickly became the replacement plot for the wedding story, hoping it would remind people of Superman's importance. Number 10. Quicksilver. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Quicksilver was introduced and killed off in the same movie. In Age of Ultron, we meet Pietro and his sister Wanda, who received their powers through experimentation. While Quicksilver is a mainstay in the comics and fairly well known, and is also a popular character, often considered one of the fastest former mutants around, though maybe not quite as fast as Northstar, his long time standing as Wanda's sassy twin brother did not protect him in the MCU. Quicksilver was taken out by a hail of bullets that he couldn't run fast enough to stop. Instead of allowing the bullets to hit their targets, which would have been the very mortal Hawkeye and an innocent Sokovian child, he instead sacrificed himself and died. This is why the Avengers need a healer in their party, I'm just saying. Number 9. Bucky Barnes. But this time we are talking about Bucky Barnes as Captain America. Bucky was currently standing in as Cap during the Fear Itself event, and it was during a fight with Sin, who is currently Scotty at the time, that Barnes seemed to pass away. The passing was tragic, dramatic, and unexpected. Of course, we would learn in later issues of the Fear Itself main event series that Bucky was actually saved by Nick Fury's Infinity Formula, which revived him, and as such he was not in fact dead. But he decided to keep his resurrection a secret, letting everyone else believe he was dead, going underground for a time and returning once more to his Winter Soldier mantle. At least he had Black Widow to keep him company. Number 8. Hank Pym. While we all expected that Ultron would be the downfall of Hank, as the AI was likely one of his biggest mistakes and probably one of his biggest regrets, we were still caught off guard when we realized the Hank Pym we'd known had ceased to exist after merging with Ultron. Originally during the Rage of Ultron story, when these two merged, it was thought that Hank still existed within the being known as Ultron Pym, Tim's consciousness. This was also after he'd just returned. Hank had actually been believed dead in a previous event when facing the enemy known as the Beyonders, but it seemed Hank returned only to die again while facing Ultron, dying the moment he was forced to merge with his creation. What's even more surprising is he hasn't been seen since, and it's been like 5 years, so there's a good chance that this death could remain permanent. Number 7. Green Arrow. During the CW-verse Infinite Crisis event, Green Arrow died sooner than expected, shocking fans. Fans of the Arrowverse likely expected the death would be coming at them, as it had been foreshadowed previously, but what they didn't expect was that Oliver Queen, played by Stephen Amell, would die so soon into the event. He died within the first part of the event, shocking many. The fact that the death came as a surprise was just what the network wanted. Fans expected Oliver Queen to die, they reasoned, so why not catch them off guard with their timing? And so they did just that. I mean, it was also just shocking in general that they decided to kill off and end the show that started the CW/DC verse, the Arrowverse, which is still going on and is still often referred to as the Arrowverse, despite Arrow ending, but I guess they had a good 8-season run. Number 6. Batman. Usually when Batman dies, it's in a way that seems very non-final. He'll fall into a pit or go MIA and be presumed dead, or he'll get terribly injured, but manage to recover somehow. When you compare his standard deaths to the one that he suffered in Final Crisis, it's easy to understand why it appeared to be so shocking. In Final Crisis, he was basically mummified by Darkseid, who attacked Batman with his Omega beams after Batman managed to wound him. It was bad. Superman managed to recover Bruce's body, which basically just looked like a skeleton. This was Batman at his most dead. The most dead I feel like that we'd seen maybe ever, leaving people to wonder how Batman would even recover from this. Of course, sure as the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, he did return, though the explanation for him returning was so bad and strange, it was almost more shocking than his death. Number 5. Hulk. In Civil War II, Bruce Banner and the Hulk were put to rest for good. Bruce no longer wanted to be plagued by his Hulk form, and so took a few measures to make sure this would never happen again. After Amadeus Cho helped his friend Banner by taking away his burden and transferring all Bruce's gamma radiation into himself. To make sure that he never again transformed into the big green giant, Bruce had an arrowhead constructed made of gamma-enriched vibranium, basically making his own version of a silver bullet. He entrusted the arrowhead to his friend and teammate Clint Barton, aka Hawkeye. Although Banner had not turned green or had an episode in some time, when Inhuman Ulysses predicted that it would come to pass and would cause massive deaths, Hawkeye did not hesitate and swiftly executed Bruce before he had a chance to transform. Of course, it's probably them chasing him down and trying to catch him that made him transform in the first place, so that prediction, who knows. However, this was the end of the Incredible Hulk, but it would lead to the beginning of the Immortal Hulk that everyone has come to love. Number 4. Kitty Pryde. Captain Kate, as she currently prefers to be called, or I guess I should say preferred, recently had a very shocking end to her character. What's more, although all mutants can pretty much return whenever needed due to the 5 merging their powers to resurrect any fallen mutant, Captain Kate has not even been able to set foot on Krakoa, which for some reason doesn't seem to recognize her as a mutant, cutting her off from her friends. During Marauders, Kate was betrayed by none other than Sebastian Shaw, and it was revealed that, like the portals, Kate was unable to phase through Krakoan plant life, leaving her and Lockheed swimming with the fishes, Kate appearing to drown while tangled up in Krakoan roots, and leaving fans wondering when or if they'd ever see her return. Number 3. Cable. In a surprising turn of events, Cable killed Cable during the miniseries Extermination. The death of older Cable came about when both he and young Cable disagreed on how best to avoid a catastrophic future event. Older Cable aimed to avoid the catastrophic future by showing the younger X-Men responsible the error of their ways, whereas younger Cable believed they just needed to be straight up eliminated to prevent the events from taking place. Young Cable believed his older self had become weak and soft, and so killed him. It was also pretty crazy that the issue in which old Cable died was also the issue in which young Cable first appeared, though we wouldn't actually even find out till the end of the issue that old Cable's murderer was actually his younger self, leaving many fans shocked that a younger Cable was appearing to take the place of the established, grizzled, and well-loved older version. People are still, I feel like, kind of shocked by it. Even today. Number 2. Black Widow. There was a point when I definitely saw this death running headlong at us, but I was hoping, like almost everyone, that there could be another way. please, there's gotta be another way. Of course, there wasn't. In the MCU, Black Widow chose to sacrifice herself in order to recover the Soul Stone, which the Avengers needed to rebuild the Infinity Gauntlet, reverse the effects of the snap, and save basically 50% of the universe, including their other colleagues, friends, and fellow heroes who had perished. We knew something would have to be sacrificed to get that Soul Stone, because we saw that before. We knew it was coming, and yet it still didn't hurt or surprise us any less when it did. Especially considering that it seems like this is a permadeath for Black Widow in the MCU, and that there will be likely no way of bringing her back. She died before she even got her own movie. That's pretty shocking. Number 1. Wasp. A lot of deaths in Ultimatum were shocking, mostly because they were so permanent, but also because a lot of them were pretty gruesome. We talked about another of Janet Van Dyne's death on part 1 of this list from the main continuity, but the one from the Ultimate line, more specifically Ultimatum, was one of her most shocking deaths ever because of how gruesome it was. Here, Janet dies and then is eaten by the Blob. And just FYI, it wasn't like she was small at the time and he like just accidentally swallowed her or something. This was gruesome. Like, I'm gonna eat you life-size type of thing. Like, I'm gonna literally, your guts, or you know what I mean. One of the reasons why Ultimates existed, of course, was to be the darker, more shocking alternate world to Marvel's usually more bright and optimistic main continuity, so I guess they succeeded there.
Starting us off at number 10 is Batgirl. Now, this one has a bit of a heartwarming message at the end, but before we get there, one of the most famous stories in all of the DC universe is The Killing Joke, written by Alan Moore in 1988. In this story, Barbara Gordon as Batgirl squares off against the infamous Joker and shockingly gets shot in the pelvis. Luckily, this bullet didn't kill Batgirl, but it did unfortunately render her as a paraplegic and end her Batgirl career for the rest of her life. Now, even though it was a loss as Batgirl, it was a new beginning for Barbara Gordon as Oracle. Thanks to the writers Kim Yale and John Ostrander, instead of axing the character of Barbara Gordon, they went ahead and made her a new kind of superhero. A superhero who works from her desk constantly, helping the world's heroes through a worldwide communications network. So, once again, it's a loss as Batgirl, but a huge win for Barbara Gordon as Oracle and the rest of the DC universe. A true example that humans of all abilities can be superheroes. So, maybe it's not a loss after all. I just really wanted to share that inspiring bit of comic book history. But now, let's really get to the losses. At number 9, we have Miss Marvel. One of the longest rivalries of all time in comic book history is between Rogue and Miss Marvel. In the crazy packed issue of Avengers Annual number 11, written by Chris Claremont, we see the first appearance of X-Men's Rogue and the return of Carol Danvers as Miss Marvel after a controversial year-long absence after she gave birth to a child who was later revealed as the villain Marcus Immortus in Avengers number 200. At the end of the book, writers sent Miss Marvel back to Marcus's home dimension with him, and the Avengers let her go. Not being a huge fan of that choice, Chris Claremont wrote Miss Marvel back in as a mysterious blonde woman who almost fell to her death off of the Golden Gate Bridge until she was rescued by Spider-Woman. It was then revealed that this mysterious woman was actually Carol Danvers, and that in a previous fierce fight against Mystique's adopted daughter Rogue, Danvers temporarily had all of her powers stolen, thus giving Rogue not only all her Miss Marvel's powers, but memories too. Spider-Woman then took Carol back to Professor X, hoping that he would be able to use his telepathic powers to unlock Carol's memories, but alas, only was able to unlock some of them. Even the ones she did get back, she lost the emotional connection to. Now that's a huge loss. At number 8, we have one of the many Green Lanterns, Guy Gardner. Back when Green Lantern Abin Sur crashed his ship off the coast of California, there was a 50-50 chance the ring would choose Hal Jordan or Guy Gardner. Hal just happened to be a bit closer to the crash site at the time. Eventually, Guy did get his ring though and kept most of his crime fighting on Earth, while Hal was off in the cosmos fighting otherworldly threats and all things like that. Guy was known to be a bit of a jerk though, and a bit of a hothead. Many people, because of his demeanor, often didn't think of Guy as a real Green Lantern. So after a while of getting teased and not willing to take any more of the pestering, Guy challenged Hal to an all-out battle in Gerard Jones's Guy Gardner Reborn number 1. What was the award? The winner would become the official Green Lantern of Sector 2814. Guy was the loser and had to give up his ring and say goodbye to the Green Lantern Corps, and even though he wouldn't admit it, this gutted him. The Green Lantern Corps gave Guy purpose and drive. Guy ultimately lost it all. That being said, a little bit later he was back in business after stealing the yellow ring off a dead Sinestro's finger and put his newfound powers right back to good use. He might have been a bit of a jerk, but he still sounds like a good guy to me. Get it? Coming in at number 7 and staying with the Green Lanterns, we have Hal Jordan. That's right. What's the old saying? Payback's a bad thing? Yeah, you know how the saying goes. Unfortunately for Guy, he didn't get his revenge, but rather Hal Jordan was overpowered by other Alpha Green Lanterns. During the final Crisis story arc, Hal Jordan is awoken to a group of Alpha Lanterns accusing him for the murder of Orion and believing that he is under possession of the evil god's Apocalypse. After the testimony of Alpha Lantern Kraken in the final Crisis number 5, written by Grant Morrison, Hal is convicted for the crime and stripped of his ring and Green Lantern status, leaving him just another mere mortal. But don't worry, he gets his powers back because of course he would. He's Hal freaking Jordan. Bringing us back to the Marvel Universe, at number 6 we have Quicksilver. In Brian Michael Bendis' 8-issue series titled House of M, Quicksilver is stripped of all of his mutant abilities, and funny enough, it's kind of by his own hand. The story begins by all of the mutants discussing the fate of Quicksilver's sister Wanda Maximoff because of her mental instability. Talks of destroying her are even brought up. But luckily for Wanda, Quicksilver wasn't about to have any of that. So, he took matters into his own hands. He immediately reported what was being talked about to Wanda, and then she used her reality warping powers to cause her entire reality to change. In this new reality, mutants reign supreme, with Magneto being in charge. Slowly realizing that this was a fake reality, and arguments erupted between Magneto and son Quicksilver, with Quicksilver lashing out at Magneto, telling him that he had to do what he had to do to save his sister, because those he trusted most were wanting to kill her. Enraged by her father's choice to choose mutants over his children, Wanda uttered the 3 fateful words that brought an end to it all: no more mutants. Thus dropping the mutant population from thousands down to just 198. Quicksilver not being one of them. Ouch. I guess that's what you get for trying to help out your sister. Moral of the story, kids, don't help out your siblings. Just kidding, I know my brother and parents are watching. Hi guys. Coming in at our halfway point is the ever so cool and almost invincible Wonder Woman. Back in 1969, Denny O'Neil took an awkward spin on the Wonder Woman comics, thinking he was being a progressive feminist, but in reality was just stripping Wonder Woman of all of her powers and duties. Along with master artist and storyteller Mike Sikowski, O'Neil wrote a storyline with Wonder Woman giving up her powers, lasso, and wicked cool costume to be an independent working woman as an undercover spy of the highest caliber. Doesn't sound like a terrible idea. For a bit, right? Well, reactions were a bit mixed at first, and then slowly became a bit more opposed, and then finally became strongly against it. Gloria Steinem, a huge icon and activist for the women's liberation movement, wrote an article for a magazine that stated the storyline was anti-feminist. It was believed to be anti-feminist due to the fact that she was stripped of her powers and was no longer stronger than man, as well as learning martial arts from a man as well. She became just another woman living in a man's world. As well, she was still fighting man's battles. Since then, O'Neil has gone on record and profusely apologized, saying that he thought he was helping the women's movement, but agrees now that he was far from. No matter what, to me, taking away a superhero's powers, no matter how the hero identifies, seems like a bad idea. Imagine taking away Superman's powers and reading about the life and stories of Clark Kent for the next decade. Boring. At our number 4 spot, we have the luscious Goldilocks super buff god of thunder himself, Thor. Our Lord and Savior Stan Lee, with the help of Larry Lieber, brought us all Journey into Mystery number 83 in August of 1962. Thor was known as an arrogant brawler who at most times was not able to put his ego aside. So, Odin, father of Thor, decided to send Thor off to planet Earth. What gives? When I was younger, I was sent to my room and couldn't leave. This guy gets the entire planet? What's he complaining about? Well, not only was he sent to Earth, he was also stripped of all of his powers as well as brainwashed to believe that he was actually Earthborn Donald Blake, a doctor from the United States. On a trip to Norway, Thor/Dr. Blake is attacked by aliens that started invading the area while he was on his trip. Dr. Thor then retreats into the hills and stumbles upon a hidden chamber in a hidden cave. Once there, a walking stick appears and he tries to use the stick to push a boulder in front of the doorway to hide from the aliens, which obviously doesn't work. He then smashes the cane on the boulder out of frustration, and the cane, with a flash of lightning, transforms into his famous hammer, as well as him, Dr. Blake, back into Thor, God of Thunder. This was how Odin needed to teach his son kindness and humility. But now it just makes me think that there's a possibility that I'm actually the God of Thunder too, and I just haven't had my moment yet. Anything? Okay, fine. Maybe it's one of you. Coming in at number 3 spot, we have the captain himself, Captain America. In Rick Remender's Captain America Volume 7, number 21, entitled The Iron Nail Part 5, we find Captain America square off with the not as popular but super dangerous villain, Ran Shen. aka the Iron Nail. This issue begins with Commander Duggan authorizing a laser attack on the Gungnir helicarrier, built by S.H.I.E.L.D., from a S.H.I.E.L.D. satellite while S.H.I.E.L.D. personnel are still on board. As Captain America and foe the Iron Nail continue their battle in pursuit of Captain finding out how to deactivate the Gungnir, Director Maria Hill tells him that he must destroy the core reactor. Cap continues and finally reaches the core with the Iron Nail right behind him. Just as the Gungnir destroys S.H.I.E.L.D.'s satellite, the Iron Nail stabs Cap with his tendrils and drains him of all of his super soldier serum, leaving Cap with no powers, as well as aging him back to his natural old man state. However, Cap does make one last final shield toss, destroying the reactor, and Sam Wilson comes to his rescue, defeating the Iron Nail and making an escape with the now elderly Steve Rogers. The good guys saved the day once again, but this time, Cap paid the ultimate price by losing everything that made him Captain America. Well, not everything. Because after all, you can take his super soldier serum, but you can never take his heroic heart, nor his heroic soul. You make us all proud, and I salute you, Captain America, even as a Canadian. Coming in at our number 2 is the OG stud muffin himself, Superman. In Alan Moore's Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, released in 1986, Supes is forced to fight the entirety of his rogues gallery, later finding out it was Mr. Mixie Spitlick behind it all along. Superman has one rule, and that's not to kill. Unfortunately, Supes is finally pushed to his ultimate limit and kills Mr. Mixie Spitlick. Supes feels beyond any type of guilt ever imagined and goes back to his Fortress of Solitude, where he enters a room filled with kryptonite. But not just any kind of kryptonite. Gold kryptonite, which is a specific kind of kryptonite that can leave Superman absolutely powerless. Supes leaves his Fortress of Solitude after using the gold kryptonite on himself and returns to society just as a mortal man, feeling too guilty of finally abusing his power, at least in his own mind. This time he just felt like it was time to hang up the cape. Sorry Supes, how about I go buy you a beer and you let me try on your cape. Now, finally coming in at our number 1 spot, we leave the DC and Marvel universes entirely and go back to my favorite universe again. At our number 1 spot, we have Michelangelo from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Mikey, the party dude, the goofball, the ultra rad cool skater dude. Well, not anymore. Released in October of just last year, IDW Publishing, along with the OGs Kevin Eastman, Peter Laird, and new guy Tom Waltz, was the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: The Last Ronin. This series opens up on one turtle in particular wearing a black mask, bringing readers up to speed on how New York has changed in the last few decades. New York is now under the power of the Foot Clan, operated by Karai's son, Oroku Hiroto. Spoiler alert, but it is revealed in the end of this issue that Michelangelo is the last remaining turtle and is out to seek revenge on Hiroto for killing his brothers years ago. This story paints Mikey as a much older ninja who is not the goofy, party-going turtle he used to be. Later in the issue, after a failed attempt to take down the Oroku Hiroto, Mikey tries to commit the act of seppuku. There are currently 3 issues out of this storyline and 2 more set to release later this year, and I for one can't wait to read the rest of this one and see where it ends up. But one thing is for sure, our favorite shelled, cowabunga screaming turtle lost everything. Or did he?
Number 10. Iris West is killed by Professor Zoom. That's right, Professor Zoom actually succeeded at one point in killing the love of Barry Allen's life, Iris West. Eobard Thawne, how dare you? And it would only be fixed by a continuity reset basically. Well, and prior to that, Barry Allen basically dipping from his own reality to go live in the future of the 30th century with an alternate future version of Iris who was kinda made to just exist for him, having been reborn there. So it's kinda like his Iris but also not, if that makes sense. And if it doesn't, I mean, fair enough, it's pretty confusing. Iris died after Barry and Iris were married, and after she knew about his secret identity. Professor Zoom, as he was known then, ended up simply finding Iris at a party and phasing his hand through her head to kill her instantly. This loss hurt Barry so much that later on, when he found love with Fiona Webb, who he was engaged to marry, when Professor Zoom attacked them on their wedding day, Barry could not take it and responded by killing the villain. It was after this and a following trial for Barry Allen, where he was actually charged with manslaughter because, you know, he killed Thawne, that Barry left the main reality to go be happy with the Iris of the 30th century. Although that would all get wiped away following the events of Crisis on Infinite Earths, but anyways, ain't that just how it goes when crises come a-knockin'. Number 9. Sisterhood of Mutants. In case you were wondering what was going on in the thumbnail from our previous top 10 times superheroes lost list, I'm here to answer that for you now. What's going on there is Lady Mastermind is in essence keeping Emma Frost trapped in kind of like an illusion, so Emma's like trapped in her own mind. Don't worry though, the White Queen's defeat would only be temporary. This was during the creation of the villainous mutant team known as the Sisterhood of Mutants. villains. Yeah, you might know about the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, but did you know there is a sisterhood too? It was led by none other than the Goblin Queen herself, Madeline Pryor, who had a plan for how to deal with everyone as she invaded the X-Men's headquarters. Her plan for Emma was for Lady Mastermind to keep Frost trapped within her own mind by using illusions. This, by the way, is also at a time where Emma Frost is actually one of the good guys, not the bad guys, just to be clear. However, Emma would ultimately fight back against Lady Mastermind and find a way out of this when she surprised Mastermind with her new secondary mutation, her diamond form, which makes her immune to any kind of psionic attack. Emma also kicked butt in her diamond form, landing blows that knocked Lady Mastermind into next week. Yeah, I would not want to be hit by a diamond form Emma Frost. That would hurt a lot. Diamonds are really painful, I'm sure, to be punched with. I mean, I assume a lot of things are, but diamonds especially. Number 8. Dark Avengers. Sometimes heroes lose, not when villains win against them, but just when villains win in general. That was in essence the case with what happened when it came to the creation of the Dark Avengers. The Dark Avengers were the team of Norman Osborn, who probably just called them, you know, Avengers. No dark implications from his side. That would be pretty suspicious if it's like, hey guys, look at my team, these are the Dark Avengers. Don't worry, they're totally great people and none of them are villains. Don't worry about it. Seems a little suspect. Their editorial name though was definitely the Dark Avengers from a reader's standpoint, so that's how we know them. This team of villains marketed as heroes came to be after Osborn was given the reins to create his own organization after the fall of S.H.I.E.L.D. Why Norman Osborn, formerly known as Major Villain Green Goblin? Because at the time, he was being celebrated as a hero after defeating Queen Veronki, leader of the Skrull secret invasion on live television broadcast. Norman created his own organization known as Hammer, which was an acronym that he just liked. It actually doesn't even stand for anything. He was just like, I like the name Hammer. Make that make sense, let's not worry about it. He also created his own evil Avengers team known as the Dark Avengers during a period referred to as Dark Reign. So if you want to go check it out, you can look up Dark Avengers, you can look up Dark Reign, you can read some cool stuff. Number 7. Death of Green Arrow. Ollie has died a few times, but one of the most iconic deaths of Green Arrow, I would say, comes from the late 80s to 90s series of Green Arrow. Here in issues number 100 to 101, while Oliver Queen was working to infiltrate a team of eco he finds himself tangled up in one of their plots, and is one of the few people who can basically stop a bomb from going off and destroying Metropolis. Well, he can stop it going off in Metropolis, I should say. He can't necessarily stop it from going off, unfortunately. He ends up getting his arm stuck in the detonation chamber and is unable to remove it without the bomb going off. Superman shows up and somehow this ends up being a problem even Superman can't solve. Superman! In the end, Green Arrow chooses to sacrifice himself to protect the people of Metropolis rather than still save the people of Metropolis, but instead just lose his arm instead of, you know, losing his whole life. I mean, okay. I personally just think DC really wanted to kill Oliver Queen for some reason at this point, because I think Superman had some plans prior to Ollie making the bomb go boom that could have, you know, maybe worked. Bomb 1, Queen 0, I guess. Number 6. Death of Thor. You could say the death of Thor is basically inevitable. When it comes to the world of the Norse gods of Asgard, many of their demises are ruled by prophetic fate. Thor is no exception. We learn this in his fight against his uncle, Kulborson, the Serpent, in Fear Itself. During the Fear Itself event, Kulborson escapes from his prison and rises again. The condemned and long imprisoned brother of Odin once more rises to power by feeding on the fear of the people of Earth, naming his own champions who are each gifted a hammer. Thor in turn is destined to battle his uncle and in so doing unfortunately die. Despite Odin's protests at his son attempting to save Midgard, Thor does do battle with the Serpent, saving Midgard, aka Earth, but at the cost of his own life. That is, of course, until he's next resurrected, as so often happens with our favorite heroes in comics. Sometimes you just gotta defeat a demogorge and then you're back to life. You know how it goes. Man, comics. Number 5. DC vs. Vampires. DC vs. Vampires is another monster mashup of an alternate reality where the heroes of that world are overrun by monsters. In this case, the monsters being, you guessed it, vampires. The loses start, of course, with the very first issue, as the premise for this tale is set up. Okay, Premise: Mary, Queen of Blood, has been killed, and despite being a villain, she was the only one holding back vampires from all-out war. Andrew Bennett, aka I-Vampire, attempts to hunt her killers down in order to find out what is going on and why, and discovers a plot of vampire kind to take over Earth, not just starting a war, but almost completely eradicating the human race, at least eradicating their powers. The plan involves taking over the planet, subjugating the human population, and keeping them around only to treat them basically like cattle. Andrew ends up getting proof, a vial of one survivor's blood, Lex Luthor, which also seems to be weaponized against vampires. He also then decides to head out to the Justice League to warn them, but in the end he is defeated by an already turned Hal Jordan. Hal's evil again, oh gosh, who would have guessed? And that's just the beginning of the story, so it gets a lot more vampires taking over the world, if you like that jam. I personally like that jam. I'm like, yeah, put me in that jam. I like when vampires take over the world. Let's go. Number 4. Purple Man for President. Purple Man's presidency takes place in an alternate reality of Earth 460, and it's actually his rise to power that also creates another alternate universe, a very famous one, in fact, you could say. The reality of Earth 311, aka the 1602 reality. This is because Purple Man initially is imprisoning and killing all heroes alive who still oppose him. But with Captain America, Kilgrave sees a greater threat there. If he kills Cap, Cap will basically become a martyr to the people. So instead, Purple Man simply removes Cap completely from the playing board, but not in such a way that the populace can't rally around, Cap's defeat or death. Kilgrave sends Rogers back to the year 1599, and thereby accidentally creates a superhero reality set in the past, that of 1602. Number 3. Death Metal. During Death Metal, our heroes lost hardcore. That is before they won, but still, they lost at one point. They are lucky they were permitted to stick around, as that is the only way they were able to come back from such a dark place. Pun intended. Because it's Dark Knights, Death Metal. Get it? I'll just see myself out. During Death Metal, the trinity of Superman, Wonder Woman, and of course Batman ended up going against a Batman Who Laughs and his cohort Persephone. In the end, the first time around anyways, they lost and the world became reshaped temporarily in a darker image. The trinity were split up, with Wonder Woman reluctantly agreeing to join Batman Who Laughs. She didn't really have much of a choice. That's how she actually got her Chainsaw of Truth though, which I love that Chainsaw of Truth, it's so cool. And that's also how in the end the trinity was able to survive until a point that they could each get free and then basically rejoin back up with one another. Ultimately, Wonder Woman would sacrifice herself to save the multiverse, banishing the dark multiverse and restarting everything, setting it right again after getting a glimpse into the potential future, which we would know as Future State. But before that happened, it seemed as though the core JLA members would be trapped and defeated forever. It was a pretty hopeless time for a little bit there. Number 2. Time runs out. In some cases, antagonists aren't so much people aiming to defeat heroes, but are instead simply seeming natural occurring disasters which cannot be stopped. Sometimes that's the villain of the story. No matter how hard our heroes try, they just can't beat it. That is essentially how Time Runs Out ends, with Iron Man and Captain America being crushed by the unavoidable doom that is the Incursions. Literally crushed. The final incursion smooshed Earth 616 and Earth 1610 together, seemingly ending both universes. However, in the end, Dr. Doom would step up to the plate, accepting the power of Molecule Man and defying the Beyonders by saving the multiverse and creating his own battle world. But before all of that went down, everyone was trying to figure out how to stop these incursions, and ultimately were pretty much failing at doing so. In the end, it came down to infighting between Tony and Steve as everyone else prepared their lifeboats, hoping to preserve at least a few of the best of them. As Steve blamed Tony and the two fought on, the incursions arrived, squishing them and seemingly, at least momentarily, ending everything. But not so much in the end. Number 1. Deceased. If you thought Marvel Zombies was bleak, wait till you head to the DC version of that reality, Deceased. Here, instead of everyone being infected by a traditional zombie virus, it's more comic codified than that. In Deceased, the heroes and villains of the world instead become overtaken by the anti-life equation, which in this case turns them into hyper-violent, seemingly mindless beings driven only by rage. Basically, different versions of zombies. Poor Cyborg even ends up kind of as patient zero in this, spreading said virus to the rest of the population and infecting many beloved heroes the world over.
At number 10, we have the time when Thanos turns Nova into literal Lego pieces. After Thanos faces off against a large group of heroes and starts picking them off one by one, it's finally the last straw for Nova, who tries to intervene and put a stop to Thanos' mayhem. Nova, being a younger superhero, he's bold enough to take a stab at Thanos himself. And don't get it twisted, Nova is actually quite a powerhouse, so readers might have expected him to at least make some kind of a dent on the Titan. But no, Thanos effortlessly stops Nova in his tracks and turns him into Lego pieces. And this is intentional, something that Thanos does to humiliate Nova. As he does what he does, he mutters, "Like a child's toy blocks," mocking Nova's age and lack of experience. Brutal. And the list gets worse. At number 9, we have the time when Thanos knocks out Captain Marvel. This event takes place in the MCU when Carol Danvers tries to intercept Thanos' effort to use the Infinity Gauntlet. With her incredible strength, she almost succeeds at putting a stop to him, and he might even be concerned at this moment himself, because if any hero is going to swoop in and stop him at this very point, it would be Captain Marvel. I mean, she can destroy whole alien spaceships by simply flying through them with her body, among so many other things. But right as Thanos is about to lose, he reinstates his supremacy by yanking out the Power Stone and using it to power up a superpowered punch and basically knocking out Carol cold. This is a serious disrespect to Captain Marvel's power and integrity. She simply just isn't used to being punched out like this, but in this instance, Thanos is an exception. Okay, at number 8 is when Thanos totally embarrasses Atri by encasing his hands in metal. Unfortunately, what he does here goes quite beyond embarrassment and into tragedy, as he murders all of Nidavelir's people. Except for Atri, of course. Now, I know Atri isn't a superhero, but it still is a kick in the shins to Thor and the rest of the team, quite directly actually. You see, Atri was supposed to craft Thor's hammer, which he was going to use to defeat Thanos, but instead, Thanos shows up early before the team can approach Atri with the job and has the dwarf craft the Infinity Gauntlet instead, and then he traps his hands in metal. Not only that, but he kills all the other dwarves, leaving only the one that mattered to him. This is clearly an effort to humiliate Thor and his teammates by sort of saying, "Look, I'm always going to be one step ahead of you guys, and even though I could have killed Atri as well, I decided to let him tell you how it all went down. Oh, and by the way, he's useless to you now as well because his hands are in metal." At number 7, we have the time when Thanos rips Vision's insides out. Now, Vision is basically the son of Ultron and a very powerful and influential counterpart to Thanos. His abilities are very extensive, allowing him to phase through matter with ease, for instance, and although he is able to phase through Thanos at first, catching him off guard and throwing him off balance, Thanos regains control of the situation. And in this fateful moment, he pulls Vision from inside his own body and holds him up by the throat. But that isn't it. He then uses the Infinity Gauntlet to reach inside the android's body and tear out all of his wiring, putting an end to his efforts for good. Okay, at number 6 is the time when Thanos kills Cyclops by suffocating him inside a clear box. This is a brutal end to Cyclops' legacy at the hands of Thanos. When the two of them are squaring off in a big battle along with the other X-Men, Cyclops has a moment where he gets the upper hand on Thanos, and as the leader of the X-Men, the reader is expecting at this point to possibly witness a victory at the hands of the good guys, because it isn't often that we see someone as decorated and influential as Cyclops losing a fight, let alone losing his own life. But the reader doesn't get what they want here, as Thanos creates a small clear box around Cyclops' head, which seems to be impenetrable by his laser vision blasts. Not only that, but Cyclops quickly starts losing air and suffocating in the little clear box. As Captain America rushes over, he realizes that it's too late by the time he gets over to Cyclops, and he dies. As humiliating of a defeat as it is, embarrassment was probably the last thing on anyone's mind. I would assume, sadness and tragedy came first. Still pretty embarrassing now. Okay, at number 5 is the time in Avengers Infinity War when Thanos knocks out the Hulk almost effortlessly. And what makes this one extra humiliating is that Thanos doesn't even have all the Infinity Stones yet. Right around this scene, Thanos has just acquired the Space Stone, but it wouldn't seem to most that this would be enough to beat the Hulk, as badly as he does. He seems to be toying with the big green behemoth for a while before deciding he's ready to take the victory. So he just simply knocks out the Hulk. And listen, it may be easy to lose track of power hierarchies in Infinity War given all the unimaginable power coming from the Infinity Stones, as well as all the different superheroes and supervillains who come and go. But we can't forget that the Hulk is still a serious force that the Avengers themselves have had a very hard time containing in the past. So for Thanos to just toss him aside like this is definitely a major display of supreme power, and maybe a little embarrassing as well. At number 4 is when Thanos turns Wolverine's skeleton into rubber, basically. The image is too much to bear as we see Wolverine's body fall to the ground like an empty gym bag. And this comes right after Wolverine gets a big shot in on Thanos. During the onslaught to take down the Titan, Wolverine actually manages to stick his claws into Thanos' back. Silver Surfer even thinks this is the killing blow as they watch in anticipation, but much to everyone's surprise, or are they even surprised anymore? Thanos shrugs off the attack and jellifies Wolverine's otherwise indestructible adamantium skeleton. This moment is pivotal in the development of both Thanos and Wolverine's characters, considering it shows Thanos' sheer raw power and, on the other hand, totally diminishes Wolverine's long-hyped strength that seems to be near its peak during the Infinity War. I mean, who hasn't thought about how strong adamantium is and how much it'd take for somebody to get the upper hand on Wolverine? And then just to see him lying on the ground like that, still conscious but totally useless, it's too much. Next slide. At number 3 is when Thanos totally thwarts Quasar's attacks and turns him into ash with little to no effort. So in this same battle during the Infinity War, which makes up most of this list it seems, Quasar takes a shot at Thanos himself. When things are looking grim for the Allies, Quasar is called upon by Adam Warlock to support in the fight against Thanos. And Quasar comes at him with all the confidence and bravado that he's usually known for. And for good reason too, because after all, he is the one carrying the quantum bands, which have basically immeasurable power. So in this final chance to avenge Spider-Man, Thor, and Wolverine, among so many others, Quasar appears to be the one who can pull out a heroic win for the good guys. But once again, our hopes are all dashed as Thanos just explodes the quantum bands, rendering Quasar totally useless. As he falls to his knees defeated, Thanos simply blasts him with just a good old beam of power and turns him into ash. Does anyone think this list is starting to sound more and more like that compilation in The Incredibles where we see all those heroes die because of their capes? It's just like pure confidence, absolutely annihilated by Thanos' might, and always in such an embarrassing way. At number 2 is when Thor is turned into glass and then shattered. This is a devastating defeat since Thor appears to be the Allies' last hope in defeating the newly godlike Thanos. After a harrowing battle where Thor even loses his hammer for a time and then nearly suffocates in space, it's finally down to a showdown between arguably the two most powerful forces on this battlefield. But as Thor is approaching Thanos with the energy as though he's gonna deliver the final blow, Thanos simply turns him, boop, into glass. And then without hesitation proceeds to smash the Thor statue into a million pieces. This obviously takes the God of Thunder out of the fight and basically out of reality. Such a build-up suggests a much more intricate and balanced face-off would occur, but even after all the preparation and anticipation, Thanos still proves that he's no one to be messed with, even by the God of Thunder. Pretty embarrassing if you ask me. You know, you gotta feel for the guy, or the millions of little pieces of the guy that's left. At number 1 is the time when Thanos breaks Captain America's neck with a backhanded slap to the face. This is by far one of the most humiliating defeats on the list, both because of the status and build-up of Captain America's character, and also the fact that it's basically just a slap that takes Cap out of commission. During what appears to be a final epic confrontation between Captain America and Thanos, Cap is throwing some epic monologues at the godly purple alien like, "As long as one man stands against you, you will never claim victory." But as this is going down, Thanos almost entirely misses the fact that Silver Surfer is flying towards him with the intention of snatching the Infinity Gauntlet off of his hand. And he almost does too. But Thanos, of course, becomes aware of it at the last moment, and in his rage and possibly in a state of his own little bit of embarrassment, he turns and smacks Captain America in the face with a backhanded slap, breaking the hero's neck and killing him. it seems like a theme in these final encounters after Thanos retrieves all the Infinity Stones that he almost gets beaten, but then totally snaps back and shows the heroes who's boss. Snaps back. Get it? Snaps. I didn't even notice that until I said it.
Number 10. Darkseid is called. In the Snyder Cut of the DCEU film Justice League, we learn that the heroes don't actually save the day. In the original version of the tale, they kinda lose and are too late to prevent the Mother Box from calling out to Darkseid, who arrives on Earth. The Mother Box explodes, seemingly killing our heroes. However, there is one hope left. While technically in this timeline they lose, Barry Allen, aka The Flash, manages to use his superpowers to race beyond the speed of light, turning back time and giving everyone a second chance. Also showcasing how much of a powerhouse the hero can be and making him one of the most powerful superheroes on the team in this version of the story. So although for a moment they lost, the Flash gives the team a second chance, and this time they do manage to save the day, with Cyborg preventing the Mother Boxes from coming together and reaching out across the cosmos with Superman's help, and Aquaman and Wonder Woman defeating Steppenwolf, who dies while being sent back through the portal to Darkseid on Apocalypse. But that first time around, they all likely died. Number 9. Captain Britain vs. Iska. The Ten of Swords tournament, or the Otherworld tournament, was not what many expected, especially when it came to how poorly our friends over on Krakoa did. I mean, after all, they were supposed to be the heroes in this event, as they faced off against their villainous mutant brethren of Arakko, who were also under the influence of the Amenthi demons led by Annihilation. And it all started with Krakoa's ability to lose hard on that very first battle in this story. I don't know about you, but I was pretty shook after reading that first fight when I was reading this as it was all coming out. The fight went down between Captain Britain, Betsy Braddock, representing Krakoa, and Iska the Unbeaten, a champion of Arakko. The fight lasted 4 pages, and Betsy was swiftly and easily defeated by Iska, with both her sword and herself being shattered into pieces. Number 8. A League of One. Superheroes don't always lose to supervillains in the comics. In the case of the JLA story A League of One, this time around the League is actually defeated by one of their own, Wonder Woman. However, Wonder Woman doesn't do this to actually cause them harm or kill them, but simply to get them out of the way. This is because the League is facing a dragon, and there's basically a prophecy surrounding that fight that it will cost the band of heroes their lives. Wonder Woman not only manages to defeat the League, even disposing of Superman, who she weakens and then sends on a mission to save the others who she's left in danger, but also does manage to sidestep her doomed fate. Sort of. Wonder Woman was willing to die in the League's place, hoping to spare the rest of the team, but in taking on the dragon by herself, she manages to actually avoid dying. At least dying permanently. She dies momentarily, but is revived by Superman, who arrives just in time to bring her back from the brink of death by giving her life-saving CPR. So she died, but only for a minute. Number 7. Emperor Doom. In this story, Dr. Doom succeeds in taking over the world by using the powers of the Purple Man, who he keeps as his prisoner. This might sound like a lot to put on Purple Man, aka Zebediah Killgrave, whose powers aren't generally depicted as being capable of working on a global scale. However, Doom manages to boost Purple Man's power while also taking it for himself by trapping him within a large psychoprism prison. Surprisingly, Earth actually does pretty well under the rule of Doom. Hunger, crime, and war are pretty much all eradicated under his rule, but at the high cost, of course, of free will of every individual on the planet. In the end, Doom isn't defeated, but actually chooses to relinquish control, becoming bored of the monotony of ruling without any opposition. Number 6. Tower of Babel. In the Tower of Babel event, Ra's al Ghul manages to use Batman's own intel and files on the Justice League to defeat them. No. Really. Batman, being the prepared and paranoid man that he is, basically is revealed to have kept files on each member of the Justice League, noting their weaknesses and also containing contingency plans for how to best defeat them should they ever turn to the side of evil. Ra's gains access to Batman's systems and is able to retrieve these detailed files and plans via his daughter Talia. He uses this information to take on and defeat all members of the Justice League, even managing to seemingly distract Batman by robbing the graves of his parents. In the end, the Justice League recover and win the day, but they are none too pleased with Batman, whose secret intel in essence almost single-handedly allowed Al Ghul to destroy the whole team. Number 5. Days of Future Past. In the Days of Future Past reality, Sentinels rule over North America. Here, many mutants are eliminated with only a few managing to survive, but still with many of them being kept in camps where they are worked until they die and are branded with an M tattoo on their face, so they will forever be recognized as a lowly mutant, unable to escape prosecution. Even many superheroes heroes have been killed in this reality of Earth 811 because they attempted to protect mutants and put a stop on the Sentinels' reign, which also made them targets. One of the main reasons why the Sentinels are successful in taking over in this story is because of the deaths of Senator Robert Kelly, Professor Charles Xavier, and Moira McTaggart, who were all killed by the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Number 4. Death of the Justice League. The Death of the Justice League has kicked off as of issue 75 of the current Justice League series, which started back in 2018, and wow, it is rough! What happens to the Justice League? Well, they face off against Pariah, who himself is from one of the first worlds to be targeted during the events of Crisis on Infinite Earths. He was cursed with basically watching all these worlds die again and again, unable to stop it, despite being one of the first people to warn everyone that Crisis on Infinite Earths was coming. Now, with the multiverse reset following the events of Death Metal, Pariah claims that he sees the signs of the crisis happening again. Desperate to prevent this, his plan is to wipe the slate clean when it comes to the heroes, so that the possible new Anti-Monitor who will come into existence will have no reason to continue with the crisis. Seems like some flawed logic to me, but this man has also seen some, so I understand his desperation to do whatever he thinks will work when it comes to avoiding another crisis. Number 3. Age of Apocalypse. While the Age of Apocalypse does eventually end, this reality is based on the whole idea of what the world would be like if the big bad villain won, and by big bad villain, we of course mean Apocalypse this time around. Which is precisely what happens here. These events are actually all set into motion by Legion, who accidentally causes the death of his father, Professor X. Legion traveled back in time with a plan to kill Magneto, but Professor X shields Magneto against Legion's attack, dying instead in his place. Apocalypse ends up attempting to take over the world earlier on in his timeline in this universe, the AOA reality of Earth 295. Magneto is the only one who attempts to oppose Apocalypse, and as such, En-Sabah-Nur is mainly successful in his attempt for world domination. Apocalypse would oppress humanity, seeing superpowered beings as superior, and it would be many years before his reign of terror was ended. Number 2. Final Crisis. Which actually apparently wasn't so final, as we have another crisis headed our way now, known as Dark Crisis. But regardless of whether or not it was actually final, Final Crisis was definitely a bad time for Earth. In this story, Darkseid actually succeeds in obtaining and releasing the anti-life equation on Earth. He puts it on the internet where it can be easily seen and then spread. Those who see it basically lose their will to live, becoming enslaved to Darkseid and his will, instead of having their own. Well, in the end, the heroes do manage to break free from the influence of Darkseid and the anti-life equation, defeating Darkseid in the end with a Radion bullet. Darkseid still manages to enslave all of Earth and many of its heroes, for a time being seen as the victor. Number 1. Life 9 of Moira X. Well, this life in the end seemingly gave mutants the information needed to beat the rise of the Sentinels and of AI, it also was a world where they had lost much. If anything, it actually set the stage for the reset of Moira's 10th life, where mutants supposedly won. However, even that victory would be revealed to be more complicated, as Moira's true motives were revealed during the events of the 2021 Inferno series, and it turns out her motives were actually to kinda end mutant kind in a nicer way. Still, just taking this world and this continuity as it is, the mutants here have almost all been exterminated. In this life, Moira joined forces with Apocalypse in an attempt to make a final stand against the all-powerful Nimrod. They would not be successful in killing Nimrod, who had killed so many mutants and had also worked to oppress the humans as well. They would only manage to retrieve the information on how and when the Nimrod came to be, allowing them to succeed, hopefully, in Moira's 10th life, where she and mutant kind had failed in her 9th. However, we also know that that didn't really work out because Nimrod does exist in her 10th life, so basically are the mutants kinda screwed? I think maybe they are.
Number 10. Lex Luthor. Imagine your long-distance son, who you were finally gaining ground with, is killed by a giant 7-foot clone of himself. And then his psycho grandpa steals his body and puts it in a sarcophagus alongside a chaos crystal, which leads to the villains from Apocalypse coming and fighting you for it. Now, imagine your friends show up and start intervening, unintentionally blocking you from stopping the villains from stealing your son's body. How absolutely fuming might you be? That's kinda hard to imagine, isn't it? Well, basically, after the Shazam and Justice League aligned Lex Luthor tried justifying this, Batman lets both of them know why they should keep their mouths shut and not insert themselves into conflicts they know nothing about. Batman gets 3 good punches across Shazam's face, leaving him shocked and embarrassed, and then knocks Lex Luthor on his butt with a nice stiff punch, hurting his ego and his face. Number 9. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. As with almost all comics that take heroes from two different universes and throw them together, those heroes have to fight at least a little bit before they can join forces. It's just tradition at this point. So, of course, in 2016, when we see Batman team up with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, a little scuffle has to take place. Oh, also, if you thought this kind of team up would be silly, yeah, maybe. But it's totally awesome. In their scuffle in the second issue of the comic, Batman basically makes them look like amateurs. They end up hitting each other, being stunned by the Batmobile, having their weapons taken and used against them. Michelangelo starts to get some kind of conversation going before Splinter shows up and splinters the fight. It is super cool, and so is this comic. Give it a read. Cowabunga, dude. Hey there, nerds. Did you know that every time you hit that like and subscribe button, my appreciation of you grows by 4? 4 what? I don't know. I just work here. Anyways, keep whacking those buttons for more spicy content. Number 8, Nightwing. You know, I think Batman needs to kind of ease up on just punching people instead of talking. Sure, it gets stuff done, but then you end up crying at the Oscars while accepting your Best Actor award, so... When Batman first comes into contact with the Court of Owls, the members have special seals hidden in their mouths. The first Robin, now going by Nightwing, could possibly be one of them, as his great-grandfather is. So, how does Batman figure out if his old partner, longtime friend, and member of the Bat family is still loyal? Well, after a bit of lip from Dick Grayson, Batman punches Nightwing right in the mouth and knocks out his tooth to check. He was supposed to be a Talon of the Court of Owls, but he clearly isn't. Remind me never to become a Robin, okay? Number 7, Green Arrow. Green Arrow and Batman have had a few scuffles before, and on the last list, we learned he isn't even considered a threat by Batman, really. Things kind of get taken to another level, though, in Superman Batman issue 14 in 2005, Pretenders to the Throne. Batman and Superman have become villains and rule over the country. Batman brings Superman to Green Arrow as a sick, twisted birthday present so they can pummel him together. Green Lantern actually gets Supes for the kryptonite arrow, which seems to only make Batman more angry, and after a hit with the bow, he completely lays into Green Arrow. That is, until Superman completely disintegrates him with his heat vision. Yikes. You know, maybe this is more sadistic than embarrassing. Number 6, Spawn. In 1994, Spawn was a powerhouse of money making. Now take that character and stick him in a comic with arguably one of the most popular characters ever, Batman, and you've got an instant success. While it may have been over the top ridiculously violent, it's still an awesome comic. As we said before, any team up has to have a little scuffle between the two main heroes, and this was one hell of a scuffle. It was brutal and violent. While it may have ended in a draw, during the fight, Batman actually ended up stabbing Spawn in the face with a batarang. The scar from this attack made its way into mainline Spawn comics, while Batman walked away without as much as a scratch. Fight Batman, and he'll give you a scar even your fans have to remember. Number 5, the Justice League. In Justice League Doom, the animated movie, Batman is being scolded by the other members of the Justice League for having contingencies to immobilize each member of the League. They are deciding if they should make him leave the Justice League for this. Batman just kinda helps them decide. If you people can't see the potential danger of an out-of-control Justice League, I don't need to wait for a vote. I don't belong here. And he just walks out of there. Superman goes to him and asks what his contingency for Batman himself was, and he says, the Justice League. As someone on Reddit said, Batman is 100% right in this fight. Batman quit on his own terms, Batman built the Justice League's watchtower and has a deep understanding of how it works, and Batman left the watchtower to them, despite having designed, funded, and built it. Number 4, The Flash. The Justice League animated TV show in 2001. After the somewhat newly formed Justice League become fugitives, running and hiding from the Thanagarian troops, they take shelter in a department store. They come up with the solution of trading in their superhero costumes for regular street clothes to disguise themselves. This is when Flash pipes up, trying to voice his opinion about the whole secret identity thing. Batman cuts him off, walking right up to him, pointing at each member who has a secret identity, and straight up just saying their real names. Clark Kent, Wally West, Bruce Wayne. Yeah, shut up, Flash! Number 3, Aquaman. Okay, look, Aquaman does have some serious power, and in recent years, he's gotten a hell of a lot better. Partially thanks to Jason Momoa. But this story, well, it really doesn't make him look good. In Legends of the DC Universe number 27, the Joker goes to Atlantis and convinces everyone there, including Aquaman, that he is the king of the land. Aquaman even admits he's heard of Joker before from Batman, but that he just doesn't pay attention. Aquaman goes to the surface where he suddenly has trouble walking, can't figure out how to contact Batman, and he gets pepper sprayed. Then, Batman shows up and says no to helping Aquaman, so Aquaman attacks him. This gives us a full 3-page spread of Batman completely beating the gills off of Aquaman. Which is even more embarrassing when you realize Aquaman has actual powers. Number 2, Martian Manhunter. Okay, this is a short little moment, but it shows us a side to Bruce Wayne I don't think any of us knew existed. In JLA issue number 27 in 1999, there is a single page. Bruce Wayne is meeting with Clark Kent and a mystery woman who Clark introduces as Hino Ray, and she greets Bruce. In the very next panel, we find out that this woman is actually John Johns, the Martian Manhunter, in disguise. How? Well, Batman says that while the accent was flawless, the name was a dead giveaway. Now this may fly right over your head, it did for me at first, but Ray Hino is the name of Sailor Mars from Sailor Moon. That means that Batman, Bruce Wayne, billionaire and mass detective vigilante who has mortally wounded characters like Darkseid and beats criminals to a pulp with his bare hands, watches Sailor Moon. So does Martian Manhunter for that fact. Is it embarrassing? Up to you, but what? Number 1. Judge Dredd. In the Batman vs. Judge Dredd comic that ended up putting Batman in the world of 2000 AD's most famous character, Judge Dredd, Batman is arrested and taken to the Hall of Justice for being a vigilante and carrying around all the tech and weaponry that Batman does. Judge Dredd refuses to ally with Bruce to fight Judge Death, who is going to Gotham and will kill everyone there and on that Earth, saying that 1. He is going to put Bruce away for 20 years for his crimes, and 2. That Gotham is out of their jurisdiction. Bruce loses it and busts out of his bonds and starts to wail on the judge. A judge? That's 10 years in prison. Make it 20, Bruce yells as he kicks Dredd in the face. Number 10. Peter Parker. Hey, we didn't say which Spider-Man was doing the embarrassing here. Peter Parker and Miles Morales met for the first time when Peter was teleported to Miles' universe. Now, I don't know why Peter's first decision was to attack Mr. Morales. He's had clones of himself before and he's also been to other alternate universes, but hey, that's what he did. And it was 110% a mistake. As fans of Miles know, he is extremely capable. And he also has a unique Spider-Man power set. He used his Venom sting to paralyze Peter while jumping over him. He then went invisible and got Peter with a sneak attack kick to the face. It doesn't stop there though. After Peter demasked Miles, he got a nice electric shock that knocked him out cold. For an 11-year-old kid, Miles gave the experienced Peter Parker quite the beating. Number 9. Winter Soldier and Falcon. For a young lad, Peter Parker seems to overpower a lot of people. In his introduction to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Peter just shows us and 2 of Captain America's best pals that he ain't someone to mess with. During their fight, he overpowered the super soldier, even using his metal arms against him, disables and webs up Falcon, and redirects a huge chunk of metal flung at him by the Winter Soldier, all while quipping in the best ways possible. It was honestly so awesome to see when it first happened. He leaves them laying on the ground exhausted and webbed up. Not only an embarrassment for the 2 veteran soldiers and heroes, but a really fitting and hilarious introduction for the character to the MCU. Number 8. Luke Cage. A lot of the time, when a new hero is introduced into a comic book world, a fight between the misunderstood hero and another has to take place. That is exactly what happened when Luke Cage came on the scene. Luke Cage, the hero for hire, showed up in the Amazing Spider-Man number 123, hired by J. Jonah Jameson to capture Spider-Man for the death of Norman Osborn. Luke Cage ain't a guy you should underestimate by any means. Super strength and stamina, bulletproof skin, and a healing factor. But it's Spider-Man. Luke tackles Spider-Man off a roof and gets a few punches in. But Spider-Man kicked him off of another roof, teased him about basically being a mercenary, slammed him through a brick wall, got several fists to the face in, used Luke's own weight against him, and punched him through a skylight. They come to blows later on in the comic with pretty much the same outcome, causing Luke Cage to quit this one particular job. Number 7. The Hulk. In terms of raw power, Spider-Man stands absolutely no chance against the Hulk. I think his spider sense may give him some kind of advantage, but there is no way he is lasting long in that fight. Unless he gets a power boost in the form of, I don't know, the power cosmic? Oh, that's exactly what happened in the Amazing Spider-Man issue number 328. The Grey Hulk, who yes is a bit weaker and logical compared to his Savage counterpart, is hired by Sebastian Shaw to target Spider-Man. Money's always a good motivator. Unfortunately for Hulk, Spider-Man has been going to the cosmic gym and hitting the cosmic weights. He lands some pretty heavy blows on the Grey Goliath and even blinds him with a new I-beam power. When some kids are put in danger though, Spider-Man ends the conflict quick by punching the Hulk into orbit and then saving him before he suffocates, standing all confident with his hands on his hips and like that. Number 6. The Fantastic Four. In the very first issue of his self-titled magazine, Spider-Man is putting other heroes to shame. Spider-Man infiltrates the Baxter building, where he is encased in a plexiglass cage that he very easily opens the door to. He takes a single punch from the thing before he throws him into Johnny Storm. When Reed tries to catch Peter, he totally just dodges it and webs up Mr. Fantastic's hands. He uses his spider sense to detect Sue Storm while she's invisible and spins her around really fast with her lasso. But then, Johnny Storm gets him in a circle of flame. He says, and I quote, "Well, I'll just jump over that clown's little trap." It's honestly a pretty impressive display, and it happened in no less than 1.5 pages. The fight ends when Spider-Man lets him know that he's here to join up, and with that little fight was just a display of what he can do. Yeah, that little display would probably do better than a resume. Number 5. Iron Man. In the Civil War storyline, we know that Spider-Man initially is on the side of Tony Stark's Iron Man, but after he sees the lengths that Tony is willing to go to, he has a bit of a change of heart. Obviously, this leads to a scuffle between the two. At this time, Tony had given Peter the Iron Spider suit. What he didn't tell Peter is that he built in an emergency override that would shut down the suit and essentially shut down Peter with the simple phrase Omega Omega Epsilon 9. It's only a bit of a jerk move. You took Peter under your wing, but you're going to plant a failsafe against him? It kinda makes it look like you know you're guilty. But then again, he is a genius, he is a member of the Illuminati, and he is not the kind of guy to take risks. But how is this embarrassing for Tony? Well, I'm glad you asked, my little nerds. Peter is no idiot, and behind Stark's back, he hacked into the suit and built in his own override to override the override that Tony put there. Passcode, surprise. And the suit is back up and running and covers Tony's helmet in a thick layer of web, allowing Peter to get in a good punch and escape. Number 4. Wolverine. This one's a pretty quick one. I bet some of you thought I was gonna pull from the Wolverine vs. Spider-Man comic. I'll do you one better. It should be obvious, but you don't dare insult Mary Jane Watson to Peter's face. In Amazing Spider-Man issue 522, Peter is awoken with a call about a newspaper article claiming Mary Jane has a little entanglement with Tony Stark. It's obviously not true and actually a setup by a villain. But that's not the point right now. Peter got out of his bed in Stark Tower and goes looking for his wife. Along the way, he runs into Wolverine in a room with a very lovely high-up view of the city. Now, Logan decides to start going on about how Mary Jane messed up big time, and after a warning from Peter, he decides to comment on her lack of brains. This lovely little comment gets him thrown through an unbreakable glass window, and it gives him a really colorful way to catch a cab. Number 3. Daredevil. When Spider-Man was in possession of the symbiote suit, he wasn't his normal self. He was much more ruthless. And Spider-Man can already knock criminals into a coma when he is pulling his punches. When Spider-Man interrupts Sin Eater Stanley Carter from attacking Betty Brant and almost killing her, he starts to lay into the guy, beating Stanley while giving him an earful. Peter goes so far that Daredevil notices his heartbeat pounding and pulls him off of the beaten villain. He defends the criminal from Peter, who is seemingly gonna kill him. If you want him, you'll have to come through me. Probably not the best choice of words there, Daredevil. The very next panel shows Daredevil flying through a window. If it wasn't such a serious moment, I would laugh. Nah, I did laugh. Is that wrong? I can't help it, I'm sorry. Number 2. The X-Men. It seems that Spider-Man really shows his skill when he comes into contact with teams of heroes. First the Fantastic Four, and in the 4th issue of Secret Wars, the X-Men. As if dealing with multiple superpowered beings was his speciality or something. I think the best part about these altercations is the way he just keeps talking while he's embarrassing them. After Xavier senses Spider-Man listening in on their conversation, Spider-Man attacks the X-Men a little prematurely, I'll admit. He dodges Wolverine, webs Colossus's face, dangles Rogue from a rod, webs up Nightcrawler faster than he can say BAMF, and swats Wolverine away with a single swing and escapes. It's just so crazy to me how he knows that he easily outclasses almost every one of the X-Men. Or if not, he knows exactly how to subdue them. Number 1. Superboy. If we're doing a video about characters embarrassing other heroes, there's almost always going to be one point that has to do with the DC and Marvel crossover event. Just like the first point, this isn't actually Peter Parker though, but it's a clone of him, so that's basically the same thing. When the DC Marvel crossover happened, Ben Reilly had taken up the Spider-Man mantle. And it was him that fought Superboy on a rooftop. To get things going, Spider-Man hits the Superboy with a webbing right to his very stylish sunglasses. Superboy, just trying to get a hit on our Spider friend, busts a hole into a water tower, drenching the entire battlefield. Spider-Man wouldn't stand too long in a one-on-one slugging match with this guy, but that's not his specialty anyways. Just as Superboy is about to land a flying blow into Spidey, he jumps out of the way, firing webbing all over the guy and leaving the soaking wet Superboy to fly straight into an electrical box, taking him right out of the fight.
Number 10, just his bones and a beautiful memory. This one chokes me up every time. It's not only physically brutal, but emotionally brutal. Like so many superhero defeats that stick with me truly seem to be. In this case, it is Superman himself who is defeated by his friend and ally Wonder Woman. This all goes down in the story from outside of the main continuity, Wonder Woman Dead Earth. In this comic, Diana awakens in a post-apocalyptic world, where she seems to have forgotten what happened to the planet. There was a great war, and following it a great fire, and it is in issue 3 that she actually finds out the truth about what happened to this now dead Earth, and her involvement in that. What happened was the Great Fire, and the Great Fire was her. In the past, in Dead Earth, the Amazons attacked humankind, and while Diana attempted to lead peace talks between both sides, this ultimately fails, and then the humans decide to basically nuke Themyscira. Diana's full power is unleashed when her bracelets are removed, but it's not enough to stop the nuclear strike against her home. In the end, her mom, her sisters, her entire world are all destroyed and lost to her. Superman rushes to help, but also arrives too late after prioritizing his own parents, who also were victims of a nuclear attack in Smallville. Her power fully unleashed, heartbroken and filled with rage, Wonder Woman takes out her frustrations on Superman. The two fight, and ultimately this untethered and unlimited power that Diana has tapped into proves to be enough for her to destroy Clark after their fight also has obliterated the Earth via collateral damage. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, why not show us you love us by clicking that subscribe button? I know there's a bunch of you that aren't subscribed, so you know, if you want to subscribe, it helps us out. Number 9, the Justice League are dead. Welcome to Dark Crisis. Or really, welcome to Justice League issue number 75, the beginning of Dark Crisis. In this issue, the Justice League goes up against Pariah. Pariah used to be a scientist trying to stop the death of universes, who basically became corrupted when he was cursed to watch worlds end over and over again without being able to do anything to save them. I mean, to be fair, that would, I think, make pretty much anyone corrupted and kinda crazy. Pariah is back, and this time he intends to end the suffering of the multiverse by ending the heroes of the main continuity. He does this because he believes in destroying the main continuity he'll kind of be able to end the cycle of destruction, seeing it as kind of the root of the problem because the heroes from that reality have in essence meddled too much with the state of the multiverse. So he's like, in order for us to save the multiverse, we kinda gotta get rid of you guys. As a result, he seemingly handily defeats the Justice League in one go, blasting them with his own power after making them fight sort of the darkness, which is like an army of evil characters they fought before, but really it's just the darkness, leaving only Black Adam to survive, return to Earth, and tell the tale of what happened. Of course, the Justice League would return because, you know, this is comics, we gotta come back around to it. But still, this issue and their initial fate here was pretty wild. Number 8, and that will be the end of the X-Men forever! What can I say? I'm a sucker for the classics. This one comes to us from the old days of X-Men, the Jack Kirby and Stan Lee days. In issues number 17 and 18 of Uncanny X-Men, Magneto is revealed to be the villain who has infiltrated the X-Mansion, having returned from outer space where we last saw him be transported to by the Beyonder. He has returned to once more resume getting revenge on the X-Men and mankind. It isn't until the end of issue 17 that Magneto is revealed as he greets the parents of Warren Worthington III, aka mutant student student Angel's parents. Having handily defeated almost all the X-Men one by one after luring them to the mansion, Magneto's plan is to send them up in an air balloon, which is basically like attached to a metal ball that contains them. Fortunately, while initially defeated in issue number 17 and struggling to escape in issue number 18, Iceman ends up getting showcased as the true hero in this issue. Kinda helps save the day here, almost single-handedly defeating Magneto just as the X-Men escape their deadly air balloon fate and return to back him up. Number 7. You Are Not My Father. Probably one of the most emotional fights, especially when we consider that at the time we had a lot of complex emotions about, well, at least one of these people, happens between Professor Charles Xavier and his star pupil, Scott Summers, aka Cyclops. I'll let you guess about who he had complex feelings about. This one went down during the events of Avengers vs. X-Men. It happens at a tense time in the history of the X-Men, not just because they were up against and at conflict with the Avengers as a result of a debate about what to do with the incoming Phoenix Force, but because of the revelations that had happened in recent years in regards to Charles's more shady practices, like not telling his students that the danger room they were training in had actually itself become a sentient AI mutant who was in essence kind of being oppressed by the headmaster of the Xavier Institute, for example. In the end, Charles attempted to talk down Scott, who at this point had the full power of the Phoenix Force, or he takes the full power of the Phoenix Force during this fight, and uses it at his fingertips. Basically, he was also being corrupted by that. Himself filled with a bunch of complex feelings at the time in regards to Charles, Cyclops ends up refusing his once mentor's help, and instead kills him in a blaze of phoenix flames. Despite the fact that Charles at this point was a controversial figure, he was still, I would say, considered to be more hero than villain. And despite the fact that Cyclops himself is usually known for being a hero, he still defeated a man often also known for his own heroic and idealistic dreams. Number 6. The day the proudest, most noble man ever finally fell. Obviously, I'm kinda trimming down that quote a bit, but it just fits a little bit better in my point. What an iconic defeat. So iconic it not only shook the comic book world, but also the everyday world as well, making headlines. And sure, all in all, this was kind of a publicity stunt to help boost comic sales, but it also became a huge story for comic book fans everywhere to look back on for years to come. While Superman would return, his defeat against Doomsday and ultimate initial death in the comics would be felt the world over. The death of Superman is epic, and I personally always like coming back to it, not just for Clark himself, but for the characters that are a big part of his world. Lois and Jimmy, his parents, John and Martha. Ugh, makes me feel so many emotions. Also, why was Jimmy so handsome in the 90s? I ask myself that every time I return to Superman comics in the 90s. I'm like, Jimmy, you're looking real jacked. Number 5. Take heart, Kitty. Oof, this one hits me right in the feels. I go back to what it felt like the first time I read this one, and whoo, it got me. This defeat comes to us from the pages of one of my favorite ever X-books, I believe, the first volume of Marauders, which started back in 2019. I think this is one of my favorite X-books of all time. I mean, I'd have to really think about that and rank those, but pretty sure this is up there if it's not in the top 5. Although, I think it is in the top 5. For me. In issue number 6, we're caught off guard when Sebastian Shaw shows up on a boat where Captain Kate, the leader of the Marauders, has been left alone. Now for those who haven't been keeping up with, the Krakoa era X-Men stuff and what it means for Kitty Pryde, initially she had problems using the gates on the island and basically became the captain of a ship and the leader of the Marauders. Not Sinister's Marauders, not those Marauders. She was reclaiming the name for a heroic group of buccaneers that would basically sail the seas and help to free mutants in countries where they otherwise were not free, helping to bring them to Krakoa. And honestly, the team is also star-studded. Here, Kitty preferred to go by Kate. That is, until she died. Sebastian Shaw shows up to attack Kate with fast-growing Krakoa seeds. Considering she can't use the gates and currently can't phase through Krakoan materials, Kate becomes restrained as a result. Lockheed is netted and tossed overboard, and Kate is left to sink alone, along with the ship she is on, which Sebastian of course blows a hole in. This plot point is made even more devastating by the implication that Kate will not be able to be resurrected, as this plot point is made even more devastating by the implication that Kate will not be able to be resurrected by the Five as a result of her inability to interact with Krakoan gates. Number 4. Everything Cracked. The Final Crisis story is all about the brutal defeat of superheroes and really kind of like everyone on Earth. Final Crisis was the story of how Darkseid basically took over the world by broadcasting the anti-life equation to everyone on the planet via email, text, radio, and television broadcasts, basically making them realize that he is the one true ruler of everything, and so they may as well just give up and surrender to him. It was brutal, devastating, and honestly affected pretty much everybody in the comics. Eventually the heroes would manage to rise up and take back the planet, but for a while there, it was really bleak. Things got so bad that they even caused Batman to break his one rule against using guns in order to take on Darkseid. And this event started with the death of Martian Manhunter as well. Rough. Number 3, the one true enemy of the great Charles Xavier. Oh boy, we are going to the Ultimate Universe for this one, so you know it's gonna be brutal, right? This comes from the Ultimate X-Men series. Here, Sinister, who looks super different in this universe, so if you're like, wait a minute, who's that? That's Sinister? Yeah, it is. He infiltrates the X-Mansion and manages to sneak up on Charles Xavier himself, despite his immense telepathic powers. Xavier here is no match for Sinister, who takes him out of the security room he was in, where he was seemingly surveying his students. When Charles asks Sinister where he's taking him, Sinister responds that he's escorting Xavier to his one true enemy, and then he pushes him down some stairs. It's completely awful, really. Xavier isn't the only one who gets brutally and honestly insultingly messed up by Sinister in this issue. Angel also in this fight goes from being intimidating in one panel to basically mentally manipulated into choking himself against his will in another panel. So yeah, which I mean, I don't know. I kind of expect something like that for Angel, but Xavier? It's not fair. It's not very, that's terrible. Number 2, instead I will simply break you. Possibly one of the most powerful moments I've ever read in Batman comics. This epic issue that was an integral part of the Nightfall story is a whirlwind of a fight. And not only that, but overseen by a powerful inner monologue from Batman about all the wounds he has taken to get to this point, that truly highlights the struggles that really sum up this character, who against all odds always comes out on top, right? Not this time. In issue number 497 of Batman, this was the moment that Bruce fell in his fight against Bane. Bane came to finish him, but rather than kill Batman, decided to simply leave him broken, breaking his back over his knee in that massive and iconic splash panel. Number 1, but I saved you. I did it. This one made me cry all over again as I sat at my desk and reflected on it, revisiting it again. Oh boy, okay. So here we're talking about the death of Spider-Man, which honestly happened more than once in the Ultimate comic book line and universe, but I do think that this is my favorite death. This is Spider-Man's death done right, is what I mean, in my mind. If you have to do it, obviously, because I don't think many of us would really ask for something this heartbreaking to happen, but you know, here we are, it happened, and it's so sad. During Ultimate Spider-Man issue 159 through to issue 160, we see Peter in his final fight. In the final moments of this final fight, unmasked and with nothing really left to lose, he is forced to give it his all to protect the people of New York City, and more specifically, his friends, his family, his loved ones, and the people of his own neighborhood. In the end, despite everything he does in this epic fight, which spans multiple issues, he is defeated by the Green Goblin. And the ultimate version of the Green Goblin is an unstoppable, and as we later find out, immortal tank of a villain. This fight and defeat has it all though. Ups, downs, it's an emotional, action-packed roller coaster. And while Spider-Man does seemingly die, so seemingly does Norman Osborn as well in the end. So while this is a defeat, there's also at least some poetic justice felt in the end too. But goodness, Aunt May, whew. Boy, do I feel for Aunt May here. Oh, it's so awful. Number 10, Sentry. And the circle of people getting ripped in half continues. It's a vicious circle indeed, let me tell you. Sentry is often actually a perpetrator of this kind of gruesome and brutal death, but this time around he was on the receiving half of this murder method. This all went down during the King in Black event. When Null first arrived on Earth, Sentry was one of the first heroes to attempt to stand up against him and defeat him. Being the Sentry, he egotistically assumed he would easily be powerful enough to defeat Null. While Sentry tried to rip him in half, it was Null who managed to get a solid enough grip on Bob Reynolds to tear him asunder. Sentry would then be escorted by Valkyrie, aka Jane Foster, to the halls of Valhalla, and while on their way there, another shocking revelation would come to light. That some of the Valkyries were still alive, trapped but alive, and upon being found by Jane and Sentry and freed, were able to kind of return once more. Pretty cool. It should be noted too that Sentry's death and defeat was also so shocking because it took place in issue number number 1 of the King in Black series, in essence being one of the defeats that kicked off this event.
Elektra. You could say that Elektra was a victim of the well-known Daredevil villain Bullseye, but you could also say she was a victim of Frank Miller's gripping and at times very dark writing. In issue number 181 of Daredevil Volume 1, we watch Elektra and Bullseye square off in a bloody battle, which ultimately ends in Bullseye spearing Elektra right through the stomach and out her back. It's a really brutal event that changes Daredevil as a character entirely from that point on. And it's important to remember that in 1982, which is when that issue was released, a death like this for such a well-known hero wasn't quite as common as what we might be used to today. And it's not like she was resurrected again either, which is usually how this type of thing goes. She is completely done in the Daredevil timeline, only showing up in her own limited series and a couple other comics here and there.
Number 8. Batman. Although it doesn't seem surprising on paper, when Batman was seemingly killed by Darkseid, it caught a lot of folks off guard. That is because Batman is such a mainstay. He isn't a character that dies often, and definitely not in a way that feels as permanent as this if he does die. Although the idea of Batman being killed by Darkseid might not seem that surprising, because I mean Darkseid's pretty OP, Batman actually had a pretty decent plan for taking the villain out, and actually was successful using a Radion bullet. Batman successfully hit Darkseid in the chest, but not before his Omega beams could do their work. Although it seemed as though Batman was obliterated as a result of being hit by the Omega beams, it turned out that what had actually happened was a power called the Omega Sanction, which is also kind of what Darkseid's Omega beams are. And those had been used to transport Batman back through time, so he would return, but not before having weird time travel adventures.
Wolverine. While Wolverine has faced his death at the hands of Sentinels before, which actually results in his death, sort of, I figured that I would cover one of his defeats that doesn't really end in his death, but I'd say it's even more shocking and brutal, so here it is. It's when the Punisher shoots Wolverine in the face and then decides to run him over with a steamroller. This shocking and quite ridiculous defeat takes place in The Punisher number 17 and is rather uncalled for given how brutal it is. Wolverine is just sort of intervening in one of Frank Castle's missions, which, to be fair, Wolverine does do a lot, but it doesn't constitute shooting his face skin off and then flattening him into the ground with a steamroller. It's just a rough scene to witness, and I think the Punisher needs to apologize.
Number 6. Tim Drake. Recently, Robin, Tim Drake, had a big glow up. He came out as bisexual and was celebrated in his very own Pride issue. However, even the fact that the character seems to be coming up more into his own and uplifted for his sense of identity could not protect him from an awful demise that was just around the corner. Enter Batman issue number 125. Here Batman and Robin go up against Penguin and come face to face as well with Clayface. But what makes it even worse is while they were attempting to evacuate a charity gala whose attendees' lives Penguin was threatening, Robin got taken out by a goon with a gun. Just a goon with a gun. Ugh, brutal. While Robin would be stabilized, it was pretty shocking to see a character who had recently been so celebrated for identity and diversity taken out so easily and on the brink of life or death. Also, note to self, never attend a charity gala in Gotham. It pretty much never ends well.
Captain Marvel, or Marvel, the dude one. This is sort of a sad entry because he isn't defeated by any one villain, nor does he come back from it like some others may on this list. The culprit in this case is actually cancer. I don't know what happened in 1982, but this event was also published in 1982 like the Elektra thing, and was actually known as the first graphic novel to be released by Marvel. It was called The Death of Captain Marvel, of course, and it chronicled the adventures of Marvel venturing into a dark dimension where he's exposed to Compound 13, which is a nerve gas that gives him an incurable cancer. He's then visited by friends on the planet Titan, even getting a courtesy convoy sent over by the Skrulls, who pay their respects in his final moments. The craziest part about this is that Captain Marvel doesn't ever come back, save for one time when the Grandmaster brings him back briefly as a kind of ghost, but other than that, he's known to be out of the comics for good after this one. Sad.
Number 4. Captain Kate. One of the most shocking defeats and demises happened not really to just Kate, but also to Lockheed. Poor Lockheed. Not Lockheed, leave Lockheed alone. This all went down in volume 1 of Marauders from 2020. At the end of issue number 6, Kitty Pryde faces off with Sebastian Shaw, who, while considered to be a mutant who is allied with the nation of Krakoa, and so in that respect is technically a hero, I guess, has also a history of being a really nasty villain. And that is exactly what he was up to here. He kills Kate in cold blood by exploiting her weakness that at the time she struggled to phase through Krakoan organic material and gates. So he found some fast growing vine pods and unleashed them on her while trapping Lockheed in a net, which he then dropped into the sea, and then promptly sinking the boat she was aboard. One of the worst things about this too is Kate is even like, look, you can have all the seats on the Hellfire Trading Company. I don't care, just please let me save Lockheed. And Shaw's like, no. Considering that Kate was basically the main character of this series who possibly could not be resurrected, it was pretty shocking at the time. I was shocked. I was very shocked.
At number 3 is Superman. Back in 1992, a comic book called The Death of Superman was published, in which Superman is actually killed by Doomsday. The battle rages on for quite a while against this hyper-adaptable villain, with Superman showing serious signs of exhaustion as Metropolis gets more and more damaged. This being a multi-issue publication, the actual death of Superman takes place in issue number 75, which is quite a while into the series. And while it's easy for us to find that issue online today, back then, readers were waiting months to see what happened to their favorite Kryptonian. I mean, with a title like that and leaving the event right to the end, I sort of rank this as more of a publicity stunt than anything else, but whether there is marketing involved or not, there's no doubt that this event was a shock to fans, who at the time were unsure if they'd ever see another Superman comic again. Thankfully though, but also sort of expectedly, DC then released Reign of the Supermen, which chronicled the return of the hero and is known to have sold just about the same number of copies as the death of Superman.
Number 2, Green Arrow. Green Arrow's death was quite startling because he was basically kind of the person behind it. Rather than do something, he sort of just let himself be killed and defeated. And I know there's probably going to be Oliver Queen fans in the comments. They're going to be like, no, he sacrificed himself. But look, it just seems a little silly to me, okay? While beaten by the enemy, he also just kind of gave up. This all went down when Oliver Queen was blown up by a bomb that threatened to detonate upon arriving in Metropolis. Rather than let that happen or give up his arm, which was stuck in the detonator case or chamber, he decided to just surrender and sacrifice himself to save innocent people, allowing himself and the plane he was in to basically be blown up. The really crazy part of this story is that Superman was right there, and while he wasn't coming up with any amazing ideas, other than one that would cause Green Arrow to lose his arm in exchange for his life, which Green Arrow was definitely not willing to do, Soup still likely could have done something else that would save Metropolis and Ollie, and likely have allowed him to keep his arm as well, because after all, this is Superman we're talking about. If only he'd had the time to think of something better. It is hard to think of things on the spot, especially when, a bomb is about to explode, so fair enough.
Finally, at number 1, we have Peter Parker. I only don't call him Spider-Man in this entry because firstly, this is the Earth 1610 Peter Parker, and secondly because he's from the Ultimate Spider-Man series. And either way, the Spider-Man mantle is still very much alive, obviously. But this is still one of the most brutal and unexpected defeats for any superhero, partly because Peter Parker is still only a teenager in this issue where he meets his fate. That, and partly also because his final battle takes place right outside of his house in front of his friends and family. Facing off against the Sinister Six in a multi-issue battle, Peter is entirely helpless, getting ravaged over and over again by the group of villains, and no one really comes to his rescue, other than Aunt May, who actually takes out Electro with a revolver. Spanning between issues 156 and 160 of Ultimate Spider-Man, this loss takes its time and ends with deafening silence as Aunt May and MJ cry over Peter's dead body, and the series just ends. It's a rough defeat that some people forget about, maybe because it's not from our dimension, but hey, it's still a young Spider-Man dying at the hands of a huge gang of bad guys, no matter which way you splice it.
Number 10, Werewolf by Night. One of the first appearances of Moon Knight actually involved a two-part fight with none other than Werewolf by Night. What a brutal introduction to the Marvel Universe. This fight turned team-up took place in Werewolf by Night issue 32 and issue 33 in the 1972 series, the first series of Werewolf by Night. Here Moon Knight made quick work of Werewolf by Night, not just tormenting him with punches, but also with scathing insults besides. How rude. However, while Werewolf by Night appeared to be no match for Moon Knight, in the end the hero decided to lay down his arms, realizing that Werewolf by Night wasn't the villain he'd thought he was, and the two instead decided to team up to take on a common enemy that had actually turned Moon Knight against Werewolf by Night in the first place. Number 9. Midnight. Although Midnight would go on to become a villain in the comics, originally he was actually simply the son of a villain who wanted to become a hero himself. Midnight is Jeff Wild, the son of Midnight Man. Moon Knight fought against and defeated Midnight Man, and Jeff ended up confronting Moon Knight as a result. But in the end, Jeff decides to actually work with his father's enemy, wanting to become a hero like Moon Knight, and ending up as his sidekick for a time, until he appeared to be disintegrated by number 7 of the Secret Empire. Not to be confused with the Marvel event Secret Empire. This is a group, not an event. Midnight, however, would return and end up fighting Moon Knight, Spider-Man, and a team of heroes, wanting revenge on his former partner who he believed had abandoned him after his supposed death. Of course, Moon Knight probably just thought he was dead, but you know how it is when you're not actually dead, and you're like, you should have known that I wasn't really dead, man, even though it looked like I was disintegrated. This version of Midnight was a cyborg who had also been trained by and kind of brainwashed into joining the Empire. In the end, Midnight was defeated by Moon Knight with some pretty vital help from Spider-Man, and the convenient assist of Empire's headquarters collapsing. Yay. Although I don't think that was the end of Midnight. I think Midnight may have even come back after that, but yes, don't quote me. And friends, before we move on to our next spot, just a quick reminder, if you are loving Moon Knight and you want to learn even more about him, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Then we can give you more Moon Knight lists. Number 8. Dark Hawk. In the Infinity War event, Moon Knight got to take on a slew of evil doppelgangers of heroes, including Dark Hawk. A lot of these fights are short, but it's neat to see Moon Knight take on so many alternate versions of Marvel superheroes at once. For those not familiar, Dark Hawk is Chris Powell, once a teen who stumbled upon a mysterious amulet and was forever changed by it, becoming the hero Dark Hawk. The amulet allows Chris to swap his consciousness with that of the Dark Hawk android, Shi'ar tech melded with magic, which comes with super strength, speed, durability, flight, a form of self-healing, concussive blasts, and more. In the end, Dark Hawk proved no match for Moon Knight, who made quick work of him by smacking him with his adamantium staff, or truncheon if you will. That's what he prefers to call it, truncheon. I think I'm saying that right too. It's not trunch eon, is it? Probably not. I've never used a truncheon myself, but that's just based on how it's written, I'm assuming. Number 7. Daredevil. Daredevil and Moon Knight have fought one another in a team-up where Moon Knight came out on top thanks to the bombardment of loud noises and his adamantium truncheon before deciding to work together. But he's also squared off with Daredevil's evil doppelganger as well in his Infinity War tie-in. Here Moon Knight has some help from other heroes, but also ends up being the one to take down evil Dop DD, as well as a whole slew of others who gang up on him in the end. Though thankfully he is shortly thereafter joined by some reinforcements as other heroic colleagues show up to help with basically the army of evil doppelgangers that are wreaking all kinds of havoc still. These doppelgangers, they never end, they're endless. Number 6. Black Knight. Another evil doppelganger that Moon Knight comes up against during the Infinity War tie-in is Black Knight. Now granted, this isn't the real Black Knight, but it is a version of him. Black Knight and Moon Knight squaring off is also something that is just neat to see because they're both kind of like opposing knights in terms of design at least. Black Knight is a medieval inspired knight dressed all in dark, Dane Whitman, who typically fights with the ebony blade, and Moon Knight is an Egyptian inspired mummy looking dude dressed all in white and here fighting with his adamantium staff. Though Moon Knight fights with a slew of different weapons as well in the comics. Number 5. Deadpool. Wade Wilson is known for being pretty unstoppable with his healing factor and his rad merc moves, but not so unstoppable that Moon Knight can't stop him. These two duke it out as a result of a misunderstanding in Vengeance of Moon Knight issue number 7 and fought once more in the next issue over a difference of vigilante ideologies in issue number 8. Moon Knight both times makes pretty quick work of Deadpool, not being able to fully kill him of course because of his healing factor, which is kinda just what Moon Knight wanted and needed anyway in this fight. Someone he could go all out on without the fear of killing them. So it's kind of a perfect match. The other thing that makes these two going head to head so interesting is the fact that they both have their own mental health issues, and both are known for hearing and talking to voices in their head, which makes for some pretty cool moments and pretty fun dialogue. As different as Deadpool and Moon Knight are, they share a lot of similarities as well. There's a lot of neat overlap there, even though they're very different. Different but similar. Number 4. Beast. During his Infinity War tie-in, Mark Spector Moon Knight issue number 43, Moon Knight also faces off against an evil doppelganger of Beast, aka Hank McCoy. The battle ends up being more tricky than when he faced Black Knight. Moon Knight actually has to employ some quick thinking to beat Hank's evil alternate, and it seems that both are evenly matched momentarily, with both applying lessons they are learning about one another in battle to their tactics. However, in the end, Moon Knight manages to out-strategize even the evil version of one of the most intelligent X-Men members. After Moon Knight defeats Beast's evil counterpart, Hank himself congratulates him for his quick thinking, complimenting his style. Real Hank, not a evil Hank, just to be clear. Number 3. Black Panther. Well, really, Moon Knight survived a fight with Black Panther, but just as it seemed he was defeated, he did get back up and end up with the Phoenix Force merged to him, so I think we can call that a win for Moon Knight. If a fight ends with you getting an insane level of power like the Phoenix Force, you're winning, at least in the long run in my mind, even if you had to take a smackdown on your way to getting said power. These two duke it out in issue number 36 of the 2018 Avengers series, which I believe is considered volume 7. Moon Knight seems convinced that Black Panther is not himself, but is actually Mephisto, and fights against his Wakandan teched-out suit, as well as Black Panther's own fighting skills, prowess, and power behind said suit. In the end, Black Panther ends up knocking him to the ground, but decides not to end Moon Knight. However, Moon Knight is then still able to finish his prayer, and is rewarded with the Phoenix Force, which bonds with him, making him nigh invincible. Number 2. Spider-Man. Moon Knight ends up facing off against Spider-Man after mistakenly believing he was the one responsible for a building being blown up. In truth, it wasn't Spidey behind the explosion, but the two still ended up duking it out on a rooftop. This happened not in the main continuity, but in the reality of Earth 1610, with 1610 Peter and 1610 Mark Spector, aka Moon Knight. While Spider-Man proved to be a pretty powerful opponent for Moon Knight, in the end Spider-Man still decided to run away rather than continue to fight the vigilantes, so I think we can consider that a win for Moon Knight. I feel like he scared Spider-Man enough that he was like, why am I even still staying here? I'm just gonna get out of here. I'm not gonna fight you. You're nuts. Number 1. Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel is handily defeated by Moon Knight during the same story that Black Panther squares off with him in The Age of Khonshu. In issue number 35 of the 2018 Avengers series, he approaches Iron Man and Carol Danvers, aka Captain Marvel, attempting to take the baby star brand Brandy Selby from them, as Khonshu needs her power. Catching Carol off guard, Moon Knight is able to restrain her quickly and then tosses her in the trunk of Ghost Rider, aka Robbie Reyes' car, which he also has access to after taking Ghost Rider's powers. Carol is wrapped up in chains and also has to deal with what appears to be a tentacle monster in the trunk. Although she does escape, she ends up flying away, choosing to run, or rather fly, from Moon Knight than face him. Of course, she takes Tony and Baby Starbrand with her so they can regroup, but I'd still call making someone as powerful as Captain Marvel retreat a win for Moon Knight here. Granted, he is a very OP Moon Knight at this point in the story, because he's already beaten a lot of other heroes too. Which is why we should maybe do a part 2 to this list, because there's some that I didn't get to mention.
Kicking off the list at number 10, the Ringmaster. Issue 3 of the Incredible Hulk back in volume 1, we see the Hulk take on the Ringmaster. Will the mighty Hulk be a match for the Ringmaster? Well, apparently, yeah. He takes on a whole circus of crime who, might I add, do not have any superpowers, but right off the bat, the Human Cannonball gets the Hulk quite good. The Human Cannonball, just a regular guy with a makeshift hammer. This dude's spine would fold on impact if he cannonballed into the Incredible Hulk, so already I'm upset. And then it gets worse. A regular guy with a fireman's hose blasts the Hulk, and then he goes down, this time for good. I mean, I know the Hulk's mind was being toyed with here a bit, but the fact that a crime circus was able to best him in the first place, not okay. Not okay. Number 9, Doc Ock. In Eric Larson's 1992 Spider-Man run, issue 19 titled Revenge of the Sinister Six showed us a more powerful version of Doc Ock because he had new fancier arms. In fact, the whole crew had the jump on Peter at this point. He was for sure in need of backup. And right on cue, the Hulk smashes through the floor, just sending wood chips all over the damn place. Already such a mess. And he's coming in hot too. The Hulk says knock knock when he busts out of the floor. That is so badass. First he flicks Shocker out of the way, gives him the finger, literally, and then he tosses Mysterio back to sleep. And then when he goes to handle Doc Ock, he's caught off guard from his unbreakable arms with limitless power. Doc Ock had the upper hand, or 4 upper hands, I guess, in this case. And before we continue on with this list, if you want to go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, that would be awesome. No sweat, but it does help us out quite a bit. I'm not going to waste any more time. Thank you so much. For the best. Back to this list. Number 8, the Hulk Killer. With a name like that, you already know how this one's going to end. Created by Sam Stearns, the leader, Hulk Killer first appeared in Tales to Astonish, issue 86. Some detectives are going through the leader's notes. They're finding out that he's created these humanoids, but the Hulk destroyed them all but one. This humanoid was built specifically to take down the Hulk, so the cops call in General Ross. They figure this ought to be an asset in some way, shape, or form for the government, but if only they could bring it to life, because, you know, what would possibly go wrong? So they bring him to life, and it all goes wrong. He just leaves, he walks right out of the building, not even phased one bit by the bullets, of course. Then the Hulk arrives, they battle it out, and they break their surroundings, but Hulk Killer just simply absorbs all these hits. Next, Hulk Killer beats Hulk so hard, he reverts back into his banner form. It's embarrassing. Number 7, Juggernaut. Kane Marco has been one of Marvel's biggest and baddest since his first appearance in X-Men issue 12. Once Marco came into contact with a gem, he then obtained the power of the Crimson Bands of Sidorak, becoming a human Juggernaut. Literally. The Hulk on average can beat Juggernaut, but in Incredible Hulk issue 402, Hulk bumps into this Jack dude who he realizes is not just an ordinary construction worker after all, rather it's Marco. Hulk thinks he has him. He tries to save Juggernaut's life after he falls into quicksand, but then he tries to pull Hulk in as well, so Hulk's like, alright, forget it, I'm gonna let you sink, see ya. Then of course he popped out of the quicksand and the beating continued, and it kept going and going, and the Hulk went down until he was almost dead. And that's when Red Skull stepped in and told Kane that was enough beating for now. Number 6, Zax. Making its first appearance in the Incredible Hulk issue 166, the Thing from the Dynamo was originally the result of an accident that happened at Edison Nuclear Power Plant. When a group of criminals tried to power off New York City, it went south, you know, the toughest gang in town, shutting down the power during Game of Thrones. That's truly, truly awful. Keep it up, guys. So guns started blazing and it caused this massive chain reaction in the atomic reactor, and then this living energy then absorbed them, and then soon took a humanoid form with a villain voice as well, of course. Zax absorbs the electricity from its victims' minds as well, so it gains their thoughts. Hawkeye comes in with a convenient foam arrow. In fact, Hawkeye's aim saved the day here, but they don't give him credit. They actually give the Hulk the credit, which is pretty rough. But don't worry, Hulk got what was coming from Zax when General Ross merged with the living energy and then beat down Hulk and Rick Jones. Ross was actually about to finish the pair off, but Zax's personality came back and then he flew off. That was a close call, Banner. A little too close. Number 5, Brian Banner. The father of Bruce Banner was honestly a pretty horrible guy. He killed Bruce's mother is honestly pure evil, and he of course was locked away for 15 years afterwards, and then when him and Bruce reunited down the road, Bruce accidentally killed him. Yikes. Now this isn't the end of his story though, because during the Chaos War storyline in Incredible Hulk's issue 619, his dad comes back as a Hulk demon who would get stronger the angrier Banner got. Now obviously this is a traumatic experience, going down memory lane can hurt quite a bit, so this demon Hulk dad would have finished off Bruce if Jarella didn't step in to save the day. Bruce has the brain and Brian's got the pain. The Banners are a wild bunch. Number 4, Horfin. Born the offspring of a frost giant and Fenris, Horfin first appeared in the Incredible Hulk issue 422. When the Warriors 3 and the Hulk were going after Agamemnon, they followed them to Singard Castle. Horfin was created purely to guard this castle, so now the Hulk has to fight a frost wolf. And this is pretty intimidating because when the frost giant Singard himself unleashed his Horfin, the order was to kill the Hulk right off the bat. No warning, nothing, just go eat him, bye, go. And it did, yeah. I did mention this wolf was incredibly big, right? What a snack. Number 3, Pit. Image Comics introduced Pitt in Youngblood issue 4. It was their version of the Hulk. He's an alien-human hybrid created by the Creed as a literal death machine. So 5 years later, Marvel gave the fans the ultimate battle and released Hulk Pitt Reality Check. This was just 50 pages of punching and smashing and kicking. It's exactly what you would expect and want. But Pitt remained on top for the most part of this fight, and you gotta include Image Comics whenever we can, because Pitt is a treat. He's also drooling and jacked. He's just a nightmare. I would never want to deal with him. Number 2, Thanos. This is the only movie reference in this list, but I do have to include it. The time Thanos punched the Hulk in the neck so hard that the beast straight up retired. Avengers Infinity War, directed by the lovely Russo brothers, before the title card even pops up in the movie, before it's like, bam, Avengers, the Incredible Hulk is gone. You don't see him anymore. He pops out and tries to get the upper hand on Thanos, and without even using the Power Stone, Thanos rock and boppers his neck. Now, we don't see the Hulk after this for 5 whole years. And even then, he's like taking selfies and dabbing. It's not the same at all. And finally, number 1, Maestro. Maestro comes from an alternate future on Earth 9200, the Future Imperfect storyline. Now this takes place 90 years in the future, and that Hulk had basically just absorbed all this radiation from our fallen planet over time. He gets stronger, and unfortunately he also gets smarter. This isn't a dumb Hulk that gets, hosed down at a circus. This is the Maestro we're talking about. So our Incredible Hulk goes to fight him, but on the way into the massive city of Dystopia, appropriately named, Hulk finds all these weapons and artifacts from all of our fallen heroes. This new world was much harder to survive in, even with superpowers. And that's when Hulk meets up with his old friend, Rick Jones. Rick fills Banner in that basically everybody's dead except for those residing in Maestro's dystopia. He would keep the radiation level low enough for people to survive, but he would also keep it high enough for him to continue being powered up. Maestro ends up Minecrafting his way to Jones' secret base, and the two Hulks come face to face. Now part 2 of the story is obviously just a massive fight. Maestro is terrifying. He calls Banner out on a bluff, and then he just tosses a lady to smithereens. Like, he actually doesn't care. He'll kill anybody in his way. It's terrifying. Hulk hits him where the sun doesn't shine, and Maestro sneaks up and breaks his neck, ending the battle and the story just like that.
Number 10, Omega Red. While Omega Red has also lost to Wolverine in the past, he's also had his fair share of victories against him. Omega Red initially proved almost too powerful to Wolverine, especially when it came to the use of death spores, which weakened him. There was a time when Omega Red successfully captured the hero, and he only succeeded in surviving by getting help to escape, unfit to take on Omega Red alone. More recently in the comics, Omega Red surfaced wanting to join Krakoa, but he was actually revealed to be in league with Dracula, and in fact helped Dracula to get his hands on Wolverine's blood, enabling the villain to walk in the sun. Since then, Omega Red has chosen to portray Dracula being truthful with the mutants and becoming their true ally, but Logan of course still finds it hard to trust him. He doesn't really believe he's the true ally. Perhaps because Wolverine himself remembers all the times that Omega Red has stabbed him in the front and the back, and just basically stabbed him all around with his carbonadium tentacles. Number 9, Mysterio. Mysterio in an alternate reality completely defeats Wolverine, and in the most horrible way. In the Old Man Logan continuity, Mysterio manipulated Wolverine, getting him to fight against and kill all the X-Men, explaining how this could have happened given all their amazing abilities by claiming that his friends would likely hesitate to take him out. Wolverine at the time thought he was taking on a bunch of supervillains who had invaded the mansion, and Mysterio also claims that Wolverine's ego is kinda to blame for him accepting the illusion. After all, Wolverine believing that he could have possibly taken on all of these supervillains himself all at once does seem pretty arrogant. I gotta say, I kind of agree with Mysterio here. And friends, before we move on to the next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists where we get to tell you stories about people kicking other people's butts, I love telling these stories, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8, Sabretooth. Sabretooth has beaten Logan so many times that I've personally lost count. Sometimes it seems as though Victor's sole purpose has been to make Wolverine suffer. Case in point, how it became a tradition for Sabretooth to go and mess up Wolverine once a year on his birthday. Sabretooth has also been the mastermind behind a great deal of psychological plots to mess with Logan, including at one point pitting his son Daken against him, forcing Wolverine to kill his own son. Wolverine thought this was how it had to be at the time, but he would actually later learn that it all happened due to the machinations of Sabretooth. People don't often think about how smart Sabretooth is, but he's pretty crafty. Number 7. Mystique. Mystique is one of those villains you don't want to underestimate because, well, it's really dangerous to do so. Case in point, why do I say case in point so much? Who's been saying that to me that I've been putting this in my script? An example being when Wolverine thought he had killed her and would never see her again, only for her to return having been resurrected by the Hand to get revenge on Wolverine for killing her. She not only defeated him in a physical sense but also in a mental sense, using him to get information and also to mess with his head when she posed as Yukio. She really messed with him. But that's Mystique for you. Number 6. Spore. While Spore was an insanely powerful villain who did end up defeated in the end, it wasn't actually Wolverine that did the defeating in this scenario. Though he did fight against Spore. Spore appears in one of the earlier stories in Wolverine Volume 2 and was created by Archie Goodwin and John Byrne. It was an ancient entity who first appeared in issue 21, where we learned that the that was being used to increase the strength of Roundhouse at the cost of his sanity was actually a part of that villain, and that using that kind of how it infected its victims and was able to move more into the physical world through them. Spore, it turned out, was an ancient bioweapon created by the Deviants long ago that had laid dormant on planet Earth after requiring the strength of a Celestial in order to be defeated the first time around. Although Wolverine struggled to defeat this enemy, the possibly mutant healer Sister Salvation managed to use her powers to defeat it, cleansing Spore permanently, but at great cost, with her hands and possibly ability to heal becoming dramatically damaged afterwards. But Wolverine couldn't have done that alone. He needed the Sister Salvation backup for that one. Number 5. Madeline Pryor. Another enemy who Wolverine likely wouldn't stand a chance against is Madeline Pryor. In the What If Inferno issue, we get to see what would happen if Madeline Pryor had won the day and she and Sim basically turned Wolverine into their little pet, unleashing his feral side and making him a complete monster. And I really do mean a complete monster. The hero doesn't even stand a chance against their influence as they help him to give in to the darker side of himself that he's always been working so hard to repress. It's even worse than losing a battle or his life, because in this story Wolverine loses his morality and basically his humanity. I think that's worse. Is that worse than death? I think it's worse than death. If you lose entirely who you are. Number 4. Dracula. Dracula is a long-standing villain for the X-Men and Wolverine. As we discussed earlier with Omega Red, the villain recently managed to best Wolverine by concocting a plan to capture him and use his blood to power up himself and his other loyal vampires, forcing Omega to become his undercover agent on Krakoa. Of course, in the end, Omega Red would turn against him, allowing Wolverine and the other mutants to strike back, but during that first story of the new series back in issue 1, Wolverine saw himself pretty heartily defeated at the hands of Dracula, and what made it worse is that he didn't really even understand at the time that he had been playing right into Dracula's hands. Number 3. Magneto. Magneto is of course another major supervillain who bested Wolverine. He was the one responsible for transforming him into a feral version of himself, stripping Wolverine of the adamantium that coated his skeleton. This was a huge part of us learning more about Wolverine's abilities and his power set. This is when it was revealed that his claws were actually bone claws and they were themselves coated. We also learned here that he had the capacity to be intensely feral. I mean, we'd always known that Wolverine had a wild side, a feral side. It had been alluded to in the comics, but we didn't know just how wild Logan could be. Don't worry though, although Wolverine lost all of his adamantium in the fight against Magneto and his nose, Professor X made sure that Magneto paid for what he'd done, and that he could never hurt anyone again by completely cutting off his mind, in essence kinda leaving Magneto still physically alive but brain dead. It should also be noted that Magneto has killed Wolverine many times across multiple different realities and timelines. Number 2. Apocalypse. Apocalypse is a villain that Wolverine has faced across many different realities, whether with a team or on his own. In some realities, Wolverine has managed to eventually win the war against Apocalypse, but has also lost battles here and there along the way. In the X-Men animated series from the 90s, we see no exception, as Wolverine attempts to take on Apocalypse alongside the X-Men. When it's his turn to strike, he completely misses Apocalypse with his claws, who manages to escape along with most of his horsemen. Kind of embarrassing. Number 1. Dark Phoenix. While Jean Grey would likely never want to hurt Wolverine, and he has honestly almost killed her on a few occasions across the multiverse, always to her benefit of course, usually, to avoid her having to suffer. When Dark Phoenix emerges, it's quickly made apparent just how much stronger this persona and force is in comparison to Wolverine. When the darker side of Phoenix Force makes itself known at one point during Phoenix End Song, Wolverine doesn't stand a chance against it. In fact, he only survives his fight with the Dark Phoenix because he fits into her plan, with her aiming to use him as bait. It does seem as though he succeeds in weakening the Dark Phoenix, but once again, this seems to all be part of the Phoenix Force's plan, allowing her to take a more active role as she works towards getting what she wants, which she thinks at the time is Cyclops and his unlimited energy source, his optic blasts, but in reality what Phoenix really wants is to feel whole again and feel loved. What a lovely little moral at the end of that story.
Number 10, clowned around. Okay, we're going back old school for this one right off the bat. Kathy Kane entered Detective Comics in issue 233. She was a circus trapeze artist who turned into Batman, the usual, you know? She was a pretty big deal in comics. She was around from 1956 to 1979, so she was around for 252 issues. She was a part of the Bat family. So what happened? How did she go out? Was it heroic? No, not at all. How did a well-trained Batwoman get taken out? Well, let's answer that question. Now, at this point, she was retired. She was still running a circus, but nonetheless, she was retired. She wasn't choking out bad guys anymore. The League of Assassins find her, and then it turns into this brawl, even with Batman showing up at one point. Now, Batman is useless. He gets knocked out, and then when he wakes up, everything's done. The action's done. Kathy Kane is on the ground, holding onto her batsuit, and that's the end of her. That's the last time we see her. That is issue 485. That's the end of Kathy Kane. Okay, there's no big fight, really. There's no closing statement. She didn't save Batman's life. She didn't save anyone at the circus to, you know, it's just, we don't see it. Just a big L. Just a big old L. Readers were upset because all this time, and that's how you write Kathy Kane out, just to make Batman darker and to make his arc more cool and Gotham-like. Sure, okay. Number 9, Forgotten Foe. In Avengers issue 57, Vision joins the team. Now the issue is pretty deep because the team is trying to figure Vision out, where he came from, what his demeanor is, all that jazz. All he knows is that Ultron created him to attack the Avengers, which is pretty threatening from a guy who can walk through walls. So we start asking Hank Pym what he knows, but amnesia makes that a difficult task. Now he finally remembers what happened. He remembers that Ultron started to become a problem. So Hank turned himself into Goliath to defend himself, but in doing so, he went super big and he hit his head off the ceiling of the room he was in. Because, of course that happened. Hank's head versus stucco. He grew big and then he knocked himself out, and that's why he couldn't remember anything. Honestly, it makes a lot of sense. It's pretty embarrassing, but it checks out. And before we continue on with this list, if you want to go ahead and give us a thumbs up, that would be super awesome. It's super helpful for our channel. You guys are the best. Thank you so much. Now let's get right back to this list. Number 8, Paint It Yellow. All-Star Batman and Robin, the Boy Wonder. The duo goes toe-to-toe with Green Lantern, and the trick here, if you want to beat the crap out of a Green Lantern, is to paint everything yellow. If the Simpsons family got naked and fought Green Lantern, there's a good chance they might win. Green Lantern is surprised by this 12-year-old boy's decision. He honestly undermines him. But readers were just surprised that he stuck around in the yellow room anyways. I mean, he just kept punching and he was kind of losing. Batman was beating him up a lot. And Batman was distracting him, so at the same time, Boy Wonder steals the power ring from Green Lantern. If you're not gonna use it, you might as well lose it. See ya. He then gets beat up even more. Like, dude, did they paint the town yellow or just this room? Walk into the room, be like, hey guys, I'll see you in the lobby. Good luck. Number 7, Robin's Hurdle. So sure, Robin's pretty sweet being able to sneak the ring off and all, but what if I told you that athletic equipment stopped Robin dead in his tracks once before? Teen Titans Volume 1, Issue 4, way back in the 60s. The team was curious when a young sprinter won a race to qualify for the Olympics, but he just kept running after, like he was cursed, which is pretty scary if you think about it. Imagine not being able to stop running, like Forrest Gump style. Ooh. Scary. Now at the same time, Green Arrow's sidekick Speedy needed their help as well because he was being attacked when he was practicing for some Olympic stuff as well. Some guy tried to sabotage his arrows. This organization called Diablo was behind it all. So there's a clear type of villain out here with a clear project. So the Teen Titans traveled to Tokyo just to make sure the Olympics went smoothly, and Diablo met them there. He took the team down so easily, and Robin gets caught because he can't break out of 5 loose hurdles. And that's it. That's the nail in the coffin. The entire team at that point is captured and put in the rings of the Olympics. And then, of course, our guest Titan is blindfolded and is about to shoot a bunch of arrows. What a mess. Now, eventually, Speedy figures it out and the team is saved. But, like, Speedy had to save all of them. Number 6, mugged with a crossbow. Green Lantern, Green Arrow, issue 85. This is so insane. Now the issue is front and center and it's talking about narcotics. So already it's like a very aggressive issue. The first few pages, we see Oliver Queen walking at night, and he's in a bad mood. There's some girl problems, and some punks try and rob him. Now, it's not like he was tired. He didn't just come back from saving the day. He was actually in a pretty bad mood. Like I said, he had lady troubles. He was ready to fight. He was actually looking for a fight. He was glad they came along. Otherwise, he said he'd have to go home and punch the walls instead. Kyle style, you know? He was ready to go and he was fighting these punks off that were trying to rob him. And then one of them pulled out a crossbow because apparently it's Van Helsing and then, you know, muggers have crossbows all of a sudden. And then Ollie gets shot through the shoulder. He didn't even like regard the guy. He's like, oh, arrows. I know my way around that. Like, it's still an arrow. You're still made of skin. Of course. Number 5, Tony and Dr. Doom. So before we talk about this one, we're gonna fill you in a little bit on Doreen Green. She made her comic book debut in Marvel Superheroes Volume 2, Issue 8, back in the early 90s. Now she was born with these squirrel-like abilities. Her name is Squirrel Girl. She has a tail. Right, you get it. She learned that she could communicate with squirrels at a young age. She was 10. So in an early comic book, she took on Dr. Doom at one point. In Marvel Superheroes issue 8, she bumps into Tony Stark and she's showing off, right? She wants him to see what she can do. It's pretty impressive for a pitch. Squirrels start coming in out of nowhere. It's like a musical. It's nice. And then she commands them all to jump onto Tony, and even he's impressed. He's like, wow, this is crazy. And then in comes Dr. Doom to make things even more crazy. Doom interrupts Stark's electronics, and just like that, Tony is out of the fight, which was going to be my main point here. But in order to save Tony, Squirrel Girl had to send a horde of squirrels onto Doom's ship to get him out. That's how Tony Stark needs to be saved, a bunch of squirrels. Now these squirrels weren't part of the Avengers. They were just able to be controlled by Doreen. So no idea how these squirrels with little hands took down Dr. Doom. They didn't even get a chance to fight. Dr. Doom saw all this and he was like, I'm out of here. The Avengers, I can fight. A bunch of squirrels? No, that's where I draw the line. And then Doreen later joined the Avengers in their 2017 run. What a time. Number 4, Wolverine gets even more ripped. In our last video, we broke down some Ultimate Wolverine facts and his super cool adamantium skeleton that isn't as strong as it is in our regular Marvel 616 universe. Now, it still sounds like a pretty good time. You have adamantium laced into your bones, like the Terminator almost. But one time, Magneto used that weakened adamantium against him. It's just as horrible as you're probably imagining. This all takes place during the Fatal Attractions event, and honestly, I got goosebumps reading this. The adamantium mixed with his bones wasn't that strong, so Magneto pulled the adamantium out and it was like water coming out of his body. It was loose, it was liquidy, and it probably didn't feel good. Professor X thankfully wiped his mind after he healed, which is great, but what about us? I need my mind erased after I just saw that. Are you kidding? I'm gonna live in my head rent-free. Number 3, The Flash vs. Turtle Man. The Flash is the fastest man alive, but in his debut comic, it was a bit of a rocky start for the Scarlet Speedster. In Showcase issue 4, his powers are presented to him. He sees food in the air. It's a great time. It's super speedster. Now, when Barry comes across the slowest man on Earth, the Turtle Man, appropriately named, it's actually quite challenging. It takes him a few tries to get to him. Barry runs into a wall at first because there's a painting on it and he thought that was Turtle Man. So he runs into it Roadrunner style. He runs right through the wall. Bonk. Okay. Weird. And then the chase continues because Turtle Man gets in a rowboat and takes off in the water. But Barry doesn't have a boat, right? But no boat, no problem. Barry now realizes he can run on water. So now the fight should be over in at least 3 seconds. Barry still can't get a hold of this guy in a rowboat. He keeps running by him and he's just missing the boat. It's so infuriating. Now, eventually Barry whips a few donuts around him, but I mean, it's not like the rowboat was doing zigzags. He was going 3 miles an hour, just straight. Number 2, The Punch. This one comes from Justice League issue 5. Now, in this comic, Batman came in to take over the Justice League International, and Guy Gardner, Green Lantern, doesn't share the same enthusiasm as the rest of the team. He makes it pretty clear for more than one issue that he doesn't like this new leader. Although Batman is clearly a better fit, but whatever. So he got so upset that he challenged Batman to a fight without the use of his power ring. So Batman's like, all right, let's do this. And then Batman knocked him out with one punch. Blue Beetle got jazzed. He was like Joe Rogan at a UFC night. He was like, one punch, one punch. Oh my God, he was losing his mind. This is a great moment and a greater lesson. Don't take the ring off that makes you a superhero, or else you're just a regular guy fighting Batman. Literally. And finally, number 1, Bruiser vs. Wolverine. Runaways issue 12. We see Logan and Molly Hayes, aka Bruiser, have a rather quick fight. Now, at this time, Wolverine was a member of the New Avengers, and he's trying to get to the bottom of what happened to Dagger. So he, Cap, and Iron Man went to find help from the Runaways, seeing as the signs were leading to Cloak being responsible. Now, Molly, right off the bat, okay, she's one of the strongest superheroes ever, but how she handled Wolverine was way too easy, especially now that he's an Avenger, like he's on the top of his game. So the big three walk into the cathedral, Cap calmly asks her to stop screaming, and Wolverine and him are not going to hurt her. The screaming continues, and Wolverine asks if she's heard of heightened senses, right? It probably didn't feel good. He gives her 3 seconds to stop drilling a hole into his brain. He counts 3, 2, and then the next page he was outside face down in the snow. Just like that. 1 hit, bam, he was eliminated. And then when he comes back in, he's actually embarrassed. I mean, fair. He just whispers how he won't tell anybody about tonight if they don't. It's kind of funny. Then he brushes snow off, but like, you're an Avenger, Wolverine. Come on, you should have seen any of this coming. There you have it, guys. Some superheroes have an off day, okay? It's not just us.
Coming in at number 10, we have Don't Mess with Batman. It will always be somewhat of a mystery as to how Guy Gardner is able to hold on to his lantern ring. The dude is kind of rude and childish, but I will admit he has pulled off some pretty impressive things as a lantern. He's just not what you would expect from a member of the most renowned space cops. And there have been plenty of times when Guy has crossed the line, like when he was forced to work under Batman with the Justice League International. Guy didn't think this made any sense. Why was a dude in a bat suit telling him what to do? Why was Guy Gardner not the one who was running the team? So Guy kept going on about how he should have been at the helm. He was whining, complaining, and insulting Batman. So Batman wanted to get everyone in order the fastest way possible and one-punched Guy Gardner. He literally knocked the dude out, a Green Lantern in 1 shot. So if Guy had any questions about who should be in charge, they would have all been answered as soon as he woke up and put his nose back in place. This was hero on hero, but for Guy, this was still pretty damn embarrassing to get floored from 1 shot. Coming in at number 9, we have the Lantern Club. I mean, if I was a villain with super strength, I would have done the same move. It's really killing 2 birds with 1 stone, or 2 supers with 1 super. If you flip open the comic Countdown to Crisis issue 3, you will see 2 heroes squaring off against 1 villain. In the hero's corner, you have Troya and Hal Jordan, a powerful team up that would normally come out victorious. And in the villain's corner, we have Mary Marvel, a villain that sounds like she should be in a straight-to-DVD Christmas special, but in this encounter, she showed that she's no slouch. When she takes on the 2 do-gooders, she quickly knocks down Troya and then snags Hal by his ankle and then proceeds to beat Troya with Hal using the lantern like a club. And just like that, you have both of them bloodied and beaten. Really, that was the most effective way to get the job done. Coming in at number 8, we have Spider-Man versus the Spot. The Spot will go down as one of the worst Spider-Man villains ever, but that doesn't mean that he wasn't able to get one over on Spidey. For those of you who don't know, the Spot is a villain that is covered with small portals all over his body. Think of him as the game portal, where you go in one portal and you come out the other, even if it defies the laws of physics. In their encounter, Spider-Man tries to punch the Spot and ends up clocking himself in the face. It was like a grade school bully going, "Stop hitting yourself. Stop hitting yourself." Coming in at number 7, we have Pants Punched and KO'd. Not all supers come from Marvel and DC, so when I get a chance, I'd like to sneak in some moments from outside the superhero norms. For this one, we're gonna head into the world of anime to one of my favorite shows, My Hero Academia. In season 1, we have the Sports Festival, where new promising heroes go up against each other for the entertainment of the people. In this tournament, we see Aoyama, who has a belly laser power similar to Cyclops, but it comes out of his stomach. He goes up against Ashido, who has acid powers. The 2 square off in a short scrap that ends with Ashido blasting Aoyama's belt line with acid. This causes his pants to fall down, and Ashido slides in and uppercuts him unconscious. So getting knocked out while you're scrambling to pull up your pants, yeah, that's one of the worst ways to go out. Coming in at number 6, we have Packing on the Pounds. You only have to look at comic books for about 4 seconds to get enough unrealistic body standards to give an entire generation of people body dysmorphia. So when one hero puts on enough pounds that he couldn't even use his powers, that really sticks out, especially when your power is how fast you can move. I mean, if this was to happen to the Blob, I don't think anyone would notice. Being big is kind of his thing. Who were we talking about? Well, of course, the Flash. When we zoom back to the Silver Age of comics, we find an issue when one of the Flash's arch enemies, Gorilla Grodd, comes up with a plan to stop the speedster from running, and it's simple but effective. He makes him get so fat that he can't use his powers anymore. Grodd zaps the Flash with a ray that makes him retain water without him knowing. This made him bulk up until he literally weighed a ton. It would be pretty embarrassing to go from the fastest man alive to the star of My 600-Pound Life. Coming in number 5, we have Wolverine Gets a Girl's Touch. Known for being one of the coolest characters in the Marvel Universe, it must have hurt to have his body tossed through building after building from one shot from a 12-year-old girl. In issue 12 of The Runaways, Wolverine is hot on the tail of Cloak. He eventually tracks down Cloak, and lo and behold, he's being protected by Molly Hayes, aka Princess Powerful. He tries to negotiate, but things turn violent pretty quickly. Downside for Logan is that Molly is probably one of the strongest mutants ever, and with one touch he's fired out of there like a snot rocket in the shower. Getting beat up by a girl must have not been the easiest emotional scar to get rid of. Coming in number 4, we have the Yellow Room. Lanterns are very particular about colors. Some are good, some are bad, and there's a spectrum, blah 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 blah. While in All-Star Batman and Robin, we see Hal Jordan get pranked, triggered, and beat up by his least favorite color, yellow. Batman is going out of his way to mess with Hal Jordan, decides to explore his artistic side and paint a room yellow. That's quite the statement. This of course sets Hal off when he walks in, but I don't think he was ready for what was about to happen next. A young Robin slips in and manages to pickpocket Hal's ring right off his finger, and then the teenager whoops his ass. Losing your ring, getting humiliated in a yellow room, and getting KO'd by a teenager, that is a rough one. Coming in at number 3, we have Superman is trusting and dumb. Not how you would think to describe the Man of Steel, but when you hear how Lex Luthor was able to trick him, you'll be on my side. There was a comic where Superman is approached by a tailor, a guy who seemed to be a kind fellow who just wanted to do a good deed for the man who keeps the city safe. You can tell that this is an older comic. When was the last time a tailor approached you randomly and offered to make you a suit? Well, this mystery man offers to give the Man of Steel a brand new suit that will freshen up his image. Superman thinks this is amazing and accepts. The tailor makes him this suit, and without questioning anything, he puts it on. I think this might have been a case of superhero privilege. You think that you should be getting gifts from strangers at any time of the day. Well, it turns out this generous tailor was actually Lex Luthor in disguise. You think the world's greatest hero would be on the watch for the one person who's trying to kill him 24/7, but I guess he let this one slip. Oh, and there's more. Lex Luthor planted a trap in the suit. He sewed a lead-covered clump of kryptonite into the suit, which Superman never noticed. He didn't take the half second to look at the suit with his X-ray vision. Nope, there's literally a bomb in his clothes that will expose him to his weakness at the worst moment, and it was given to him in person by his arch-enemy. Lex Luthor would have had to put Superman through a whole fitting process, and he still didn't pick up on it. Coming in at number 2, we have Tin Can Iron Man. As time goes on, we have seen heroes and villains become more intricate. The way that they fight, how they can be beaten, how they use their powers. For the most part, all of these things have become more exciting. But when some heroes were originally crafted, they didn't have such interesting pieces to them. For this slip up, let's head all the way back to Avengers number 2. In this issue, the team of Earth's mightiest heroes has an enemy they never thought they would have to face, themselves. Well, kinda. See, they take on Space Phantom. This is a villain who can copy any form exactly. There's literally nothing off about his imitations, and this was his plan to beat the Avengers by turning them on each other. This was Civil War before Civil War. At first the Avengers are fooled, but then they learn his tricks, and while the Space Phantom is a perfect imitation of Iron Man, Thor is able to stop him by making it rain. And not in the cool way, he didn't throw a stack of cash in his face. Literally, rain comes down and it rusts the perfect imitation of Iron Man so he can't move. I know some of you at home are going to complain because it was Space Phantom that was beaten and not Iron Man, but it was a perfect imitation of Iron Man, meaning that Iron Man could have also be beaten by rust, which is one of the most embarrassing things that Iron Man could have learned about himself. And coming in at the number 1 spot, we have the Justice League losing to Killer Frost. There's no shortage of villains that have ice powers. When it comes to Killer Frost, she's okay. She's never really had a moment to shine. She isn't really a villain that any S-tier hero would even bother with. She would be happy to see Elastic Man show up to fight her. But there was one time when her and the Suicide Squad were taking on the Boy in Blue. An enchantment Enchantress was able to smash Superman so hard he was laying on the ground immobilized. Soup has always had trouble with magic users. Well, Killer Frost was there and saw this as a golden opportunity. She used her powers to suck Superman's energy dry, draining him of his life force and his powers. She then flew off and took out the entire Justice League. Now, while it being hard for anyone from the League to take down someone that powerful, the fact that they let someone like Killer Frost get the drop on them, that is pretty embarrassing. This is one of the biggest upsets in comic book history.
Number 10. Batman gets punched out by Hal Jordan. Batman had a hard time getting along with the Green Lantern after his murderous incarnation as Parallax. The tension between these two came to a head in Green Lantern Rebirth, when Hal decides he's pretty much fed up with Batman's paranoia and he just socks him one. A real mean right hook right to the jaw. Batman drops from the single blow unconscious. Guy Gardner happens to be nearby, who Batman basically did the same thing to in Justice League number 5, just a one shot, boom. He's pretty happy to see Batman get what's been coming to him. It's certainly not Batman's worst defeat by a pretty wide margin, but it's definitely a serious blow to Batman's pride as well as his face, since he's basically just been knocked out with a single punch from a regular human. Then again, Batman doesn't exactly have like superpowered endurance or anything, so it does make sense that he could be brought down in one punch. What really gets me going is if Batman was so paranoid, why didn't he see this punch coming? World's greatest detective gets blindsided?
And before we continue, guys, if you want to go ahead and give us a thumbs up on our video because it goes a long way for us here at the studio. And if you don't do it, we're going to be really sad for like an entire year, so. Number 9, Jason Todd. A Death in the Family is a 4-part storyline written by Jim Starlin and published in 1988, and it's one of the biggest DC moments ever in comic history. This was a huge moment in the Bat story because we see the Joker beat the second coming of Robin, Jason Todd, and when I say he beats him, I mean he beats him like to death. Yeah, he gets a crowbar and then a bomb just to end it all off. And it's more than just a beating that's so horrible. The Joker also used Jason's birth mother. Yeah, he blackmailed her in order to get closer to Jason. And then of course the Joker killed her too. So this is a double whammy. All the defeats, all the feels, our hearts. And what's even crazier about this whole thing is that it was up to the fans to decide his fate. Yeah, this actually came to life thanks to the producers allowing the readers to decide what happens next. There was a 36-hour period with a number you could call and vote for if you wanted the Joker to kill Robin or not. And it was pretty close apparently, something like 72 votes a difference, which is wild. Some fans even admitted to calling in more than once. You know, they just really wanted him out of there, eh? And this was of course a blessing in disguise because it brought us the glorious Red Hood, who we can't help but love.
Number 8, Spider-Man vs. Mysterio. When Mysterio first appeared way back in 1964, he gave Spidey a real run for his money. In this story, reports of Spider-Man robbing different stores in the night are hitting the news. Pete becomes pretty worried and thinks maybe he's going crazy, committing crimes in his sleep or something. He even considers visiting a psychiatrist at one point, but decides against it, fearing that he might ruin his secret identity. Later, a costumed being calling himself Mysterio appears at the Daily Bugle and tells Jameson that he's a crime fighter and he's here to bring Spider-Man to justice. He vanishes in a puff of smoke, leaving a note telling JJ to publish a challenge for Spider-Man to meet Mysterio on the Brooklyn Bridge for a showdown. The battle that follows is a particularly bitter defeat for Spidey, as Mysterio uses his special effects expertise to counteract Spider-Man's webbing, causing it to melt, and messes with his spider sense using a powerful mist that deadens the senses and reduces Spider-Man's reactions. Spidey is also blinded by the mist. Afterwards, Mysterio has a great photo op with Jameson, being hailed as a hero for taking on the menace of Spider-Man. Spidey uses this opportunity to hit Mysterio with a spider tracer and follows him back to his base to learn the truth behind Mysterio's evil ways, to eventually later defeat him.
Number 7, Batman, The Dark Knight Rises. Directed by, of course, Christopher Nolan, who had done the previous 2 installments, comes a pretty epic conclusion to the hit trilogy. Released in 2012, The Dark Knight Rises, as you guessed from the title alone, is about Batman rising up. But from where and why? Well, how about a broken back thanks to Bane, for starters? Yeah, this is 8 years after the Joker had a run-in with Gotham City. So now Batman has to return to take down Tom Hardy as he mumbles and frowns aggressively around town. So after Catwoman walked him into a 1v1 in the tunnels of Gotham, we get one of my favorite fight scenes from any superhero movie ever. And what I love about this scene the most is that there's no music the entire time. All you hear is Batman struggling to try and make a dent on this guy. And it makes it more realistic. There's no heroic music above that distracts you, it's just stressful. It's so stressful. I mean, you can see Bruce become more and more exhausted by the minute. Leaves you out of breath almost. And it all comes to a screeching halt when Bane picks up Bruce for one last blow, right to the spinal cord.
Spirit! Oh, your money!
Now, I know people give this movie a hard time, but seeing Batman get his ass kicked like this reminded me that it's not always the hero that gets the last punch.
Because they belong to me.
Number 6. Wolverine, crushed by the Punisher. The Punisher and Wolverine are a couple of rusty nails, real tough guys who don't take any guff and ask questions after the whooping is done. As such, when these guys go toe-to-toe in Punisher number 17 in 2001, they get straight to wrecking each other after a very short truce. They're both on the hunt for a guy who's been killing mobsters and leaving severed legs behind. Wolverine suspects the Punisher, and of course Punisher's prime suspect is Wolverine. These two guys have a pretty nasty showdown that does not end well for old Wolverine. Punisher literally shoots Logan's face off and then blasts him right between the legs with a machine gun. Wolverine is doubled over in pain on the ground, as you can imagine, and Punisher, realizing he can't really stop Wolverine just by hurting him, crushes Wolverine underneath a steamroller and parks it on Logan's head with just his hands sticking out. Some very effective work by the Punisher and a seriously humiliating defeat for Wolverine.
And number 5, Spider-Man and Kraven. We take a look now at Kraven's Last Hunt, published in 1987, and it has quite an interesting illustration on the front page. We see a dark suit Spider-Man crawling out of a grave covered in mud, and then in the background we read some alarming words on the tombstone, and it says, "Here lies Spider-Man." Huh, what? Okay, so this 5-part series, of course, as you would guess, centers around the death of Spider-Man in a way. But how does such a thing happen to old Sticky Pete? Well, Kraven is frustrated after his failed attempts to catch Spider-Man, so he comes up with this all-new plan that involves him shooting Spider-Man. So Kraven buries him, and even worse, he takes a Spider-Man suit and then takes his place in the world. So not only do you get defeated, but also replaced, adding insult to injury, literally. So then the new Spider-Man, our boy Kraven, now he roams New York and brutally attacks criminals, including a group that was actually assaulting Mary Jane. So then 2 weeks later, Peter wakes up from the effects of the tranquilizer that Kraven used, and he digs himself out to freedom. Now, I've woken up late, maybe I've missed a class or two before, but I mean this is just a whole nother level of stress. So when Spider-Man confronts Kraven, Kraven gets defensive. He's like, "Oh, no, buddy, I'm the real deal now, I'm doing this. You go back to your little hole. I'm doing the Spider-Man thing now, alright? Get out of here, bucko." And then Kraven releases Vermin, who is just, a bundle of joy to hang out with. He attacks Peter thinking he was the same Spider-Man that had given him a beatdown before. And then Peter has to convince Vermin to cool our jets. Vermin is actually about to kill Peter until Kraven intervenes. I mean, talk about a messy 2 weeks, holy shit.
Number 4. Cyclops, Infinity War. Some of the heroes on this list got it pretty rough sometimes, and this defeat of Cyclops during the final battles in Infinity War is especially brutal. After Thanos had obtained the Infinity Gauntlet and performed his epic universe-altering snap, the remaining superheroes head off into space to battle against the Mad Titan. A lot of superheroes die, a testament to Thanos' epic power, but Cyclops suffers one of the worst deaths imaginable. Just as Cyclops uses one of his signature optic blasts, Thanos conjures an airtight, unbreakable cube around Cyclops' head, and, unable to use his blasts to free himself, Cyclops falls to the ground, suffocating in the cube. Captain America can't even break the cube open with a smash from his shield. A lot of the heroes who died in this event got it pretty quick. Even Cap is knocked out quickly with an epic backhand from Thanos that breaks his neck. This is a really tragic moment for all, but a super devastating defeat for Cyclops. I'm not even that big of a Cyclops fan, but the way this thing unfolded really made me feel for the guy.
Number 3, Magneto and Wolverine. Look, I bite my nails, alright, a lot. I can't even pull a hangnail some days, okay? I grab it, I count myself down, and then last minute I just bail. It's too spicy, I don't have enough willpower to do it. Now, I couldn't even imagine this next one, okay? I couldn't imagine if all of my bones got ripped out of my body at the same time. And that's exactly what happens to Wolverine when Magneto has had enough of his nonsense. So this all takes place during the Fatal Attractions event. Wolverine doesn't even have a chance to scream, apparently. The adamantium that bonded to his bones erupted outward like water bursting through a dam. That's how they put it. Ugh. And he's still breathing when this happens. I mean, if this isn't one of the worst things to go through, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, thankfully Xavier wiped Magneto's memory and then Wolverine was out of commission for a while. I mean, he had metal spikes sticking out of his body, so I don't think he's getting any grocery shopping done anytime soon.
Number 2, Superman gets beat by Alfred. Injustice, Gods Among Us had some pretty epic moments, like this crazy showdown between Batman and Superman that ends in a broken back for Batman. In this story, we visit an alternate DC universe in which Superman has gone mad and takes over the world as a dictator, after witnessing the destruction of Metropolis by the Joker and accidentally killing his pregnant wife. It's enough to drive anyone mad, really. Batman tries to stop Superman, eventually forming a rebellion against Superman's regime. Both are joined on either side by other heroes who share their feelings, and a superhero war rages on. Sometime after poor Batman has his back destroyed, Superman is confronted by Alfred, who has recently taken one of the superpowered pills Lex Luthor invented for Superman to use to create a superpowered army. What follows is an epic and totally unexpected beatdown as Alfred gets revenge for Batman, laying some serious blows on Superman with no remorse. Alfred cares deeply for Batman, and he really lets it show here, hammering Superman's head into the ground.
And number 1, Vision, Infinity War. Okay, so Patty D mentioned earlier a pretty brutal death from the Infinity War comic, but if you're not aware of the comic, maybe you'll remember this one from the movie. So the Russo brothers made what's arguably the best superhero film to date. I mean, all of these characters who led their own franchise crammed into one single movie. I'm honestly impressed by how smoothly that movie runs. So we see Thanos as he walks his way through the universe collecting the cosmic Infinity Stones. First he decimates Xandar for the Power Stone, and then gives Loki the old Chokey for the Space Stone, even popping some blood vessels in his face at the same time. He momentarily turns Drax and Mantis into silly string and flesh cubes, and he throws Gamora off of a cliff for the Soul Stone and stabs Iron Man, forcing Strange to hand over the Time Stone. But they save the best and most heartbreaking for last, the Mind Stone. The stone that is Vision. So after a last effort attempt of removing the stone in Wakanda, his lover, Wanda, Scarlet Witch, is forced to destroy it in order for Thanos not to get it. So while holding back Thanos this entire time, she has to kill her lover. She does so successfully, and we felt the pain. The theater sat silent as we tried to comprehend that this actually just happened. But then Thanos uses the most recent installment on his glizzy gauntlet, the Time Stone. He then brings Vision back to life in front of Wanda, grabs him by his neck as well, and then pulls the stone out, leaving Vision's lifeless and colorless body to plop on the ground. And what's crazy about this is that he wasn't even using another Infinity Stone to pull that out. He just digs through vibranium with raw strength and he plucks it out, again like a hangnail. Crazy.